All we've got to do now is to start pumping.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Week 1 recap edition of the Fully Inflated Football Podcast. This is one I've really been looking forward to for the last few days. You know, going back to last week, getting close to the end of the deep dive series, it really was a sprint through that thing. Then football hits. It's always so overwhelming. The new Sunday ticket subscription, the quad boxes, all of the takes coming through. It's been really nice these last couple days to sit back, watch some football, watch everything we said about these teams for the offseason start to play out, and just organize my thoughts to get ready for this show. I'm really looking forward to it. I have no idea how long this one's going to take, but I'm going to give you all of my thoughts on every single game from Week 1. And just some housekeeping here before we dive in. I am going to post this episode here on the main channel on YouTube. Just to remind everybody one last time that this show goes every single week on my podcast feed for the Fully Inflated Football Podcast. I also have a separate YouTube channel where you can watch this live, well, not live, but the video recorded version of the show as well. So don't miss it throughout the course of the season. You can follow that link down below if you are on YouTube to subscribe to the YouTube channel for the show, or just search Fully Inflated Football Podcast wherever you get your audio feeds. And while you're at it, if you could leave a review as well, it really helps me out. The other thing is, this show is fully brought to you and supported by my amazing supporters on Patreon. That is patreon.com/thatfranchiseguy. Normally, we would have a mailbag for this show. That is the plan moving forward, is to have mailbag podcasts every week. This week, however, still a little bit backlogged from catching up with the deep dives. I also got my Madden roster out recently, so that pushed my week back a little bit as well. But yeah, normally you would get access to submit questions to this show through the Patreon inboxes where we do the mailbags. So that, and you'll get exclusive TFG content throughout the season as well, and support my channel as well. So if you want to join Patreon gang, it's an amazing community helping support the channel there. That's patreon.com/thatfranchiseguy. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get started recapping every single game from Week 1. And let's start where it all began. Thursday night football. Detroit Lions going into Arrowhead, picking up the win, and Lions fans hate me right now. They hate me because I didn't like their draft. I pushed back on some of the hype a little bit, and now I'm a big Lions hater after, the last 2 years hyping them up. It's pretty crazy how things change. But of course the Lions deserve credit for this win. It's just all about context, right? There were parts of this game that we all watched on Thursday Night Football that were lucky for the Detroit Lions. No Travis Kelce, no Chris Jones, we know that. And the impact of those drops dramatically changing really who the Chiefs were. It really only changed who the team that the Lions beat was. It doesn't take away how the Lions played. It doesn't mean that they didn't deserve the win or that they don't deserve credit for, not letting the moment be too big for them. That's not what any of my conversations on this game have been centered around. It's just when Lions fans come in and are already taking victory laps about their draft class and mad that I don't rank them as a Super Bowl team in my power rankings, for example, that's when I have to push back a little bit and be like, hold on, let's not go too far and ignore the context of this game. But yes, Detroit, I think, showed us at least what their floor is, right? They're a team that's mostly going to avoid mistakes. Yes, they did have the Marvin Jones fumble, but beyond that, they took care of the football. They were the more physical team on Thursday night. They have that tremendous advantage at the line of scrimmage with their offensive line. And, when they're in a close game, they have a quarterback that's approaching the, longest no interception streak, and they have a great run game and a physically minded team overall with mental toughness that can edge out these games really against anybody. Now, again, contextualize this. If you're going against full-strength Chiefs with Travis Kelce and receivers not dropping the ball left and right, and Kadarius Toney literally had the worst graded game a wide receiver has had by per PFF standards in 5 years, and those drops led to game-changing point swings. Is this a team that can play with a different game script? Can they open up the offense? Can Jared Goff get into more high-pace shootout types of games? Can this defense hold up when they have to, really defend the pass instead of the opponent defending the pass for them? Like, that's really what happened. These receivers were open. The pass rush was okay, but nothing special. I'm just saying that this Lions team still has a full season ahead of them. They still have a lot to prove. But for their season, this was a huge win to get a win in the win-loss column. And also just from a confidence standpoint, right? They did it. They came out in prime time. They weren't too small for the moment. And now they're going to go play the Seattle Seahawks, and they have another tough test next week. This team still has a lot to work on, a lot to improve on. And I think Dan Campbell himself would tell you that. I think Jared Goff himself would tell you that. So that's been a large part of the conversation this week. We did want to start with this game because it was the first game, so I don't want to just drone on about me going at it with Lions fans, but it did kind of make sense to start the show there. Now, I did have some other takeaways with this ball game. On the Chiefs side of things, I did think Rashee Rice looked pretty good. And this was a player coming out in the draft that I really thought he went too early to Kansas City in the second round. He's a guy that doesn't run great routes. He's not a superb athlete. I think his foot speed in his release is genuinely poor. But that said, this does seem like it might be a good fit here with Patrick Mahomes. And one thing that was in my positives column for Rashee Rice, for those on Patreon that have the draft guide, you would have been able to read this. But I said that he works really well in playmaking situations to work back to the quarterback. And he has that awareness you look for in scramble drill to find those holes in the defense. And he went to a spot with Patrick Mahomes, who's the best quarterback in the NFL in scramble drill. And we saw twice in this game, Rashee Rice was the guy coming open for Patrick Mahomes once the play kind of became extended. And I think that is a chemistry that is really encouraging, especially in their first start. Rashee Rice wasn't even a full-time starter. But you look at how these other wide receivers struggled, and there's going to be an opportunity for Rashee Rice to really step up. So he's a guy I've got my eye on in terms of fantasy football. If you're looking for some of those sneaky week one waiver pickups, I think he might become a bigger part of this offense. I still don't think he's overly explosive or anything like that, but I think he's going to be a reliable option for this passing game that obviously needs it. His size also brings something to the table that these other receivers like Sky Moore and Kadarius Toney and Richie James don't. So definitely thought Rashee Rice looked pretty good. And then on the Lions side, I'm not trying to take any victory laps here or anything. There's still a full season to go, but I got a lot of pushback when I criticized the Lions for taking Jahmyr Gibbs as early as they did. I've questioned that, a lot of coordinators do this. And coaches and staffs, they do this where they acquire a weapon, and in May or June, July, all the talk is about how dynamic the guy is and how many different ways there are to get the guy the football. And then the games start, and it turns out these guys fall back on they fall back on how they want to call a game, and they don't extend how they want to get these playmakers involved. Really, the one outlier there is a guy like Deebo Samuel for the 49ers and how they use him in the backfield, and Christian McCaffrey going to the Niners as well. It's kind of the best example of it. And I was open to the idea that Detroit was going to find a way to make this work, and I'm still open to it. But it definitely was not a great start for this idea that, Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be lining up one play at outside wide receiver, one play at slot wide receiver, that they're going to find creative ways to get him involved in the passing game. He had 7 carries to David Montgomery's 21 carries. And he had, 2 receptions in this ball game? There's a lot of football ahead. I am certainly not sealing the deal on, that being a win of a take, but they they definitely have to get him involved more if that's going to be worth spending the 12th overall pick on a, essentially at this point, backup running back and DeAndre Swift replacement. Now, I will say he looked extremely explosive. He was breaking tackles. His speed did look different. And I will just reiterate, there is an opportunity for them to get him more involved. But I do think for the Lions, at their core, they want to ground these games out, right? They want to run C-gap power and duo and, trap and dive and jam it down your throats to win games. And, Jahmyr Gibbs bounced multiple runs outside in this game, didn't trust the structure of the blocking scheme. And until he learns to do that, and I don't know if he ever will, this was a big problem with DeAndre Swift too, until he learns to do that and accepts that, this is going to be a much larger split in terms of David Montgomery getting a larger workload of than Jahmyr Gibbs. So I never really understood, like in fantasy football, why David Montgomery was going 4 rounds later than Jahmyr Gibbs, and I kind of expect that to continue, at least for the short future. But we'll see. We'll see. So, big win for the Lions, obviously. Chiefs, I'm not necessarily worried about it. They are expected to get Travis Kelce back. You get that reliable option for Mahomes back in the mix, and they work things out with Chris Jones. And even in like the case of someone like Kadarius Toney, as bad as I think that game was, and I think Toney has been overrated for a while at this point, he's just got a little bit something missing as a football player. But even then, Toney was getting open, and you don't expect him to repeat the literal worst wide receiver performance in the history, well, not the history of the NFL, but in the last 5 seasons per PFF. And even if he does have drops, you don't think it's going to impact the game in the way that it did. He had a drop go right through his hand for a pick 6, and then he had another drop down the field. If he catches the ball, the Chiefs are in field goal range still to win, and he drops that one too. So even if he has drops moving forward, you don't expect them to be as impactful on the outcome of the game. So I think the Chiefs are going to be just fine. Not worried about them really at all. Big game against the Jags, though, this week for the Chiefs. But then our next game, let's talk about the Green Bay Packers visiting the Chicago Bears. One of the more surprising outcomes of the weekend. Not necessarily surprising that the Packers won. This was a 1-point spread per Vegas. But the fact that this was so one-sided, it was basically everything that could go right for Green Bay did game, and everything that could go wrong for the Bears went wrong. And I'm not talking about, an individual game, a bounce landed one way, a field goal landed one way, a fumble, whatever. I'm talking about as far as season outlook, projecting the team season, projecting what these teams might look like. It was all pretty good for Green Bay and all very, very bad for the Bears. And I want to start with the Bears side of things, because it really is 2 sides of the ball that are a big problem here. But let's talk about the offense first. And, I'm not trying to be annoying about it, but I have pushed back on the Justin Fields hype now. Really, it feels like since he came out of the draft. Felt like I was one of few people that was willing to kind of stand on the table and say, like, yes, he does amazing things, but he does not throw with anticipation. He doesn't trust the offense. He holds onto the ball too long. He takes too many sacks. He makes questionable decisions out of structure at times. And those issues followed him into year 1 for the Bears. They followed him into year 2 for the Bears. And they were all on full display here in year 3 with the Chicago Bears after they spent the whole offseason trying to make sure he had everything he needed to succeed. Now, everything wasn't perfect, like absolutely perfect around Justin Fields. I think the play calling wasn't perfect. I think the offensive line had some losses, but you can't expect perfect protection, perfect receiver play, which I didn't have any issue with their receiver play in this game, and perfect play calling, right? You can't just say, well, let's fire our offensive coordinator and hope we can get a Mike McDaniel or a Kyle Shanahan. There's only like 5 or 6 of those guys, right? So for me, this was on Justin Fields in this game. And, JT Sullivan did a great breakdown of this on YouTube if you want the film to back this up. But it's kind of a reminder that you can't just assume that every quarterback is going to figure things out in the way that guys like Josh Allen or Jalen Hurts did. Some guys just aren't good football players. And I think Justin Fields really struggles with a lot of the quarterbacking aspects of the position. And for him to come out in week one with all of the hype, you've got, Shannon Sharp ranking him number one quarterback in the NFC. He was the leading vote getter in MVP votes this season. I can't tell you the amount of Bears fans that try to tell me Justin Fields is already a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. And you watch the film, you look at his throwing numbers from last season. He was one of the worst passers in not just last season, but in recent memory. And it does not seem like those issues in his game have been fixed, improved upon, weeded out, whatever you want to say. And it cost this team big in this game. The amount of times he's holding onto the ball, the biggest thing for me at this point is the lack of anticipation. It's your classic thrower of the football. This goes back to something I've said on this channel. Bruce Arians wrote in his book, The Quarterback Whisperer, that you want a passer at quarterback, not a thrower. And the difference is a passer throws the ball with anticipation, whereas a thrower needs to see the wide receiver open before he pulls the trigger. And Justin Fields is a thrower of the football. He does not anticipate openings against zone. He does not anticipate receivers winning against man coverage. He really needs to see the receiver open before he even pulls the trigger. And that's a huge, huge issue. You pair that with the fact that he operates as though he can do everything with his feet. The second he doesn't see something open right away, and again, a lot of times there are things open that he's not even seeing, like his processing is also an issue. So quite often he, whether he's right or not, does not think there are open receivers down the field, and his default instinct is, I got to get out of the pocket, I got to scramble, I got to pick this thing up with my legs. And he does it quite often. And when he does, that's when Bears fans get excited, right? He had a scramble in this game that was like, my goodness, he can just do things that other quarterbacks cannot. And that's true. But there are hundreds of quarterbacks? Let's just say 50 quarterbacks in the NFL that can do things consistently that Justin Fields cannot. And that's the problem with Justin Fields right now. So it's just week one. You never want to cement things in after 1 week of football, but this was as bad of a start as you could have possibly imagined for Fields. Not to mention the ugly mistakes, staring down Quay Walker, throwing the ball right to him. He has another fumble in this game. Like, it was just a worst-case game for Justin Fields. But on the flip side, this Bears defense sucks. And the unfortunate reality is the defense probably sucks because they've spent the majority of their assets investing in making sure Justin Fields has help, right? Just they have the number one pick, right? Essentially, they turn that pick into DJ Moore and Darnell Wright. Assets that could have been used for pass rushers, star corner, whatever. They go offense over defense with their biggest piece of capital from this offseason. You look at free agency. They bring in Nate Davis. Now, they did sign some linebackers, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that decision momentarily, but they didn't address this pass rush. Yeah, they brought in Yannick Ngakoue. That's not an answer. Signing Yannick Ngakoue in August is not an answer. I try to tell Bears fans when they signed him, he's not a difference-making player. You'd rather have him than not, but he's a normal baseline level starter, and he's the one guy that they have that has a history of getting after the quarterback in the NFL. Their ignorance for this defensive line is pretty crazy. They could have drafted Jalen Carter. Without any defensive support, you are putting Justin Fields in situations where he has to press and feel like he's coming from behind, and it's just not a healthy partnership there. It is really predictable that the blame is going right to the coaching staff. The offensive coordinator is always the first scapegoat in this situation after the surrounding cast. I've seen a lot of Bears fans just straight up blaming the play calling, and it is kind of funny to see that. But honestly, outside of Fields not playing great, I would put the blame on the front office. I know this regime is new, but I don't think Ryan Poles is doing a very good job here. I really don't. I wrote down a list of moves for him that are very questionable. I already just talked about not taking Jalen Carter in the draft, who looks like a difference-making pass rusher. Matt Eberflus has been trying to get a 3 technique for this defense for a long time, and they decided that they could wait, go to the second round, and get a guy in Javon Dexter. Could turn out to be a good player, but Jalen Carter looks like he might have been the pick. And Darnell Wright did not play great in this game, by the way. But more than that, because those are just rookies in their first start. I don't want to overreact there. They traded the second overall pick. Their second round pick that was the first overall pick in the second round was the 32nd pick in the draft because the Dolphins didn't have their first round pick this year. They essentially traded a first round pick for Chase Claypool, who was a liability in this game with his blocking and kind of his lackadaisical approach. And I think he's frustrated with not being involved in the offense a little bit. There's just not enough. The pie in the passing game isn't big enough for a wide receiver 3 here. It's Moore, Mooney, then it's Cole Kmet, and then it's Chase Claypool. Like, he's tapped out. He's a useless player for them at this point until the passing game can become more explosive. But that's another asset that, isn't a Nolan Smith. I think Nolan Smith went 2 picks ahead or whatever. You know what I'm saying? So that's a huge mistake with that draft pick. They give Cole Kmet a massive contract here. What is that all about? Cole Kmet is a mid-tight end, to put it nicely. Like, he's an okay starter, but they gave him $12 million a year before he even really came out and proved it this year. I didn't understand that contract at all. They also came in and released guys from the previous regime that were maybe not star players, but really poor in-house scouting of the guys they had. Kyrus Tonga has gone to the Minnesota Vikings and been a solid nose tackle for them. Tonga would be one of their starting defensive tackles right now. Travis Gibson, why did they release him? He was potentially their best pass rusher. Tennessee picked him up. I didn't understand that. They trade away Roquan Smith, who, as we've seen, is the second best linebacker in the NFL. Now, granted, they spent money at linebacker, which I think is an interesting decision when you are trying to build up your defense, spending all that money at linebacker and not pass rusher or corner. Linebacker is like the running back of the defense. It's really hard for them to make their presence felt on a consistent basis. Taquan Graham, another interesting corner that was in-house when they took over and didn't really let him shine. He had just started to break out at the end of his last season in the old regime, and they didn't really give him a chance here. They wanted to draft their own guys and see what they have there. And then, of course, the big thing on top of all this is this decision to, and this is probably where Bears fans, again, are going to get mad at me, but this is my honest opinion. They made the decision not to draft Bryce Young. They felt like DJ Moore and Darnell Wright were more valuable for this team than just taking the proven commodity number 1 overall pick, Bryce Young. Now, people are going to point to the 2 picks that Bryce Young had this week against Atlanta and say, what are you talking about? Bryce Young's a bust. But I would rather, if Carolina called the Bears last week or right now, certainly, and said, we'll give you Bryce Young for Justin Fields and Darnell Wright, and give us our first-round pick back too, I suppose, I would say, yeah, I'll take Bryce Young. Easily. Because the quarterback matters that much. So I just have a lot of question marks about this front office and if they're building the right team here for the Bears. But obviously a just catastrophic day for the Chicago Bears. And I don't know if they're going to beat Tampa this weekend. Like, this really could turn into a Caleb Williams type of football team, and I've said that before. Now, for Green Bay, I mean, where do you even want to start? I mean, everything went right for them, even without their number one wide receiver. And that's what makes this hurt even more for Bears fans is, Jordan Love had a pretty good day through the air, and he didn't even have the weaponry support. Now, I'll admit the play calling was definitely better for Green Bay. The pass protection was definitely better. Jordan Love had a easier, or a lower difficulty of quarterback performance than Fields did, but Love certainly looked better. And that's not to say Love didn't make throws, right? He has the nice touchdown with the patience to let the play develop on the back end. The third down to Aaron Jones was nice. Makes a nice third down completion to Romeo Doubs early in the game to keep a drive alive. Used his feet when he needed to. Protected the football. Thought Jordan Love looked comfortable and promising. I'm not going to have any sweeping overreactions. Everyone knows I'm a Jordan Love guy at this point. I'm not going to take any victory laps or anything. There's still a long season ahead, and that is not a good Bears defense that he went again, but it was definitely encouraging. I was much more encouraged, though, by what the rest of it looked like around Jordan Love. Like Matt LaFleur's play calling was in his bag. And, he has a couple plays where it's like gimmicky trick play stuff. He's got the throwback screen, which went for a huge play to Aaron Jones. And I was really encouraged by this. This was something that I was like, I can't really put this into a tweet or words or prove that what I'm saying is even true. But you'll just have to take my word for it. As I was watching film for the Packers deep dive, I saw like 5 times the Packers would run a play action outside zone play fake. And the whole offensive line would carry out the play fake. The running backs standing there looking back at Rodgers, and there is nobody there. Nobody. You have 5 blockers and Aaron Jones waiting for a pass, but it's not baked into the play for that to be a throwback because that's just not something teams do all the time. I have seen it. It is a thing. It's not like Matt LaFleur invented this, but I had these stashed, and I may even have had like a deleted tweet about it where I was like, this is pretty meaningless to even send this thing out. But I was like, can someone please show this to Matt LaFleur, how open a throwback screen would be? And here we are in the first game. He breaks it out. So LaFleur is grinding the tape, looking for little niches in his offense that would work. And that was just, for me, a very enjoyable, satisfying moment that I wish I could have shared with everybody else. But, you have the Y leak play where Luke Musgrave gets lost way down the field. It's another kind of play action fake that's designed to get a player lost. And it worked for a huge play in this game. Not to mention motioning Aaron Jones, creating mismatches with him, leaning with the run game. I felt like he had a good balance in terms of run pass. I thought Matt LaFleur had a really well coached game. The offensive line was spectacular. That was something I really talked up in the Packers deep dive, was how good this offensive line could be. And Zach Tom settling in at right tackle looks really good. David Bakhtiari, again, knock on wood, but this idea that he's washed up or the Packers should trade him, it's just crazy. I mean, he's still one of the 3 to 5 best left tackles in football. I was locked down yesterday. Aaron Jones himself looked sensational. Romeo Doubs looks super talented. Route runner, hands catcher, makes tough plays in the red zone. Him and Christian Watson and Jaden Reed, who had a good game too, and Musgrave, these guys really could come along and be a special group of weapons. So you're encouraged by what the offense looked like. And then defensively, this was also best case scenario. Packers fans have dreamed throughout the summer of what could this D-line be. But there's been some question marks, right? Is Rashawn Gary going to get back healthy? Can Devontae Wyatt break out? How good is Lucas Van Ness going to be? And all of those guys played really good games. Lucas Van Ness looked as good as you could have asked for. Devontae Wyatt dominated the first-round pick out of Georgia from a year ago that was shortchanged his playing time for no good reason last year. Dean Lowry, by the way, 0 pressures for the Minnesota Vikings. Completely wasted Devontae Wyatt's rookie season for no good reason. But Rashawn Gary making his return. Gary's a guy that when he gets $33 million a year in a few weeks, people are going to be like, what? They gave him that much money? It's like, yeah, because he's a premium pass rusher in the NFL, and those guys get paid, as we just saw with Nick Bosa. So that front is incredible, and it looks like they're going to be a force. And even if, did I watch that game and say Joe Barry was in his bag in terms of play calling? No, not really. I feel like they did most of the same stuff. And those quarters heavy schemes are an issue for a guy like Justin Fields that looks for big plays and doesn't take the easy stuff underneath all the time. But it's going to be really hard for him to have a bad defense when the D-line is this good. Last year, Wyatt didn't play in the first half. They didn't have Lucas Van Ness, and Rashawn Gary missed the second half of the year. So this is a massively upgraded group from what they were working with last year. And then the guys on the back end were good. Quay Walker, I'm not going to take anything away from him, and that return was incredible from Quay Walker. Really good instincts on the return, but Fields threw it right to him. I'm not going to act like that was some great interception from Quay Walker. But, year 2 linebacker, you're hoping Quay can be a little bit better than he was last year. Like, this defense could be one of the better ones in the NFL. I still think with Joe Barry, I'm hesitant to say that they can be the best, but just positives all around for the Green Bay Packers, and hopefully they can keep things going, right? Just week 1. You don't want to overreact to anything. Okay, our next game is going to be the Eagles at the Patriots, and the Eagles won this game. Good effort from them. I'm not going to take anything away from them, and I'll talk a little bit about the Eagles, but it was weird. This was one of those games where I walked away feeling better, or at least having more opinions about the loser of the game in a positive light than I did about the winner of the game in a negative light, if that makes sense. To rephrase that, I walked out of this game feeling a little bit better about the Patriots and maybe ever so slightly worse about the Eagles. Nothing to panic about or anything, but ultimately I'm rambling. I want to start talking about the Patriots because this offense was such a breath of fresh air. Bill O'Brien came in and it's a real NFL offense again. They've got pre-snap motion. Mac looks comfortable. The ball's getting out. They're not just repeatedly mashing useless runs play after play. They're finding creative ways to get guys like Demario Douglas involved by, throwing him screens and getting him open from a bunch formation where he's not going to face press coverage. Demario Douglas is an athletic, juiced up gadget receiver in a lot of ways from Liberty, a day 3 rookie this year. I love getting him involved. The different screen calls to Ramondre Stevenson, though they went a little bit over the top trying to force one at the end of the game there. But overall, I felt like the play calling was spectacular, and it does make you think a little bit, like just in the very back of your mind, like was Bill O'Brien making Deshaun Watson look a little bit better? Like I've always felt like Bill O'Brien's play calling has been pretty good. He got ran out of the league because he was because his play calling was good. He was given too much power and then made horrible decisions with his roster. But he's a good coach, right? And he was with Alabama last year. We saw what their offense has done. Like he knows his stuff. And while this offense isn't overly dynamic, or it's not going to be the first team you choose to flip to on Sundays and say, "Oh, I can't wait to watch the Patriots offense." They were moving the ball well. They looked comfortable. Everybody was getting involved. And some of these guys looked pretty good. Kendrick Bourne destroyed Darius Slay on a route in the end zone. Hunter Henry made some spectacular catches. Ramondre Stevenson looks really good. Zeke, not so much, but Ramondre Stevenson looks really good. They've got playmakers, even if they don't have a vertical passing game necessarily. But Mac will test you deep and at least keep you honest so that those things underneath open up. And Mac Jones himself, I think, reminded us that there's a lot to like about Mac Jones. He makes quick decisions, he's accurate, and he's got what you look for in every NFL quarterback that only 10 or 12 guys in the league have, and that's legitimately good pocket presence where he feels the rush and navigates pressure without looking at the rush. And it plays in the NFL. He'll step up and extend plays with his feet at times. He had a really good game. I feel really solid about the Patriots offense. And then defensively, they looked as good as advertised there. Like, we know what this defense is capable of with probably the best pass rush that Bill Belichick has had in, 5 years. Even a guy like Keon White looks good, who I definitely, I like the landing spot for New England, but I definitely didn't see him stepping in and making an impact. He's a guy that, had a huge preseason, and what did he have? 3 pressures in this game, showed up in a big way. They got a bunch of dudes there. Josh Uche. They got, wow, why can't I think of Judon? They got Barmore had a good game here. I've been hyping up Barmore for a while now. Lawrence Guy. They got dudes up and down that defensive line. And I love the way that they use their 3 safety rotations. They had, Jabril Peppers made a big play at the end of this game. Kyle Duggar, Adrian Phillips, those guys are just everywhere, lining up everywhere. And it's almost like without Devin McCourty there, this defense is even a little bit more scary because you knew McCourty was likely going to be the free safety. Now you have no idea. It could be Jalen Mills rotating in. It could be Duggar. It could be Phillips. It could be Peppers. You just don't know if you're getting single high structure, 2 high structure, who's blitzing, who's dropping into a hook zone, if it's man, if it's zone. They keep you guessing. They had a really good game plan actually against this Eagles offense. Now they lose this game because things got off to a crazy start. They have a pick 6 off of a slightly high throw from Mac Jones that bounces off the receiver's hands. Darius Slay catches it and houses it. And then the Eagles get another touchdown set up by a really bad Zeke coughing the ball up, set the Eagles up with a short field. Other than that, it was 4 field goals from Jake Elliott, who might have been the player of the game for the Eagles, not named Jalen Carter. Jake Elliott made 2 really big kicks in this game. But even then, the Eagles fought back and made this thing really close to the point that, this was really close. And I called this kind of my almost upset of the week. And that was spot on. Unfortunately, that included me picking the that included me picking the Patriots to cover a 5-point spread or a 4-point spread. And they end up losing this game by 5. So they score a touchdown late in this game. They're down by 5. They decide to go for 2 to make it a field goal game. And Mac Jones runs it in for a touchdown, but it gets called back for holding. So I'm not, no excuses. There's probably holding on the play, but if that doesn't happen, the Patriots are in a position to potentially win this game because they're down by 3. They get the ball back. Jalen Hurts fumbles the ball over on the next drive, and they got in field goal range, but instead of needing a field goal, they needed a touchdown. So this was really one of those games that was like a play here, a play there, a bad random ball off a receiver's hands that gets pick 6'd. The Patriots were the better football team in this game. I don't even think Eagles fans would really debate that. They got outplayed by the Patriots. It just didn't side their way in the end. It's not all perfect for the Patriots. They were out there with 2 day 3 rookie guards trying to pass protect against this Philly D line that we know is really good. And it was a disaster for both Sidy Sow and Antonio Mafi. They've got to get those guys healthy because not just the Eagles are going to eat against those 2 guys. And Mac was running for his life quite a bit. So that was the big kind of negative for the Patriots was what's the health situation for those guards. And I think that would help the run game too to get a guy like Michael Onwenu and Cole Strange back in there. Feels like the Patriots haven't been able to have a healthy offensive line out there for 3 years. And it's never big season-ending injuries. It's just 1 week here, 1 week there. Guys are just in and out of the lineup. I don't know why that is, but I feel good about the Patriots. Now, for the Eagles, I'm really not trying to take anything away from the Eagles. They're a great team. We know they're going to set themselves up to win 11, 12, 13, 14 games this year. They're probably going to beat the snot out of the Vikings here on Thursday night. But I'm just being honest. I didn't watch the game and be like, oh my God, the Eagles look like they're ready to run it back for a Super Bowl. Like, I thought the offense was just a little bit out of sync. You got a new offensive play caller in there. I'm not ready to make any sweeping judgments about if losing Shane Steichen and going to Nick Sirianni and the other offensive coordinator, if that's going to be a downgrade for them. But early signs aren't super positive there. Defensively, the pass rush played great, but on the back end, they had a lot of open receivers in the middle of the field, and we know that both their linebackers left in free agency, both their safeties left in free agency. There were some questions about that middle of the defense coming into the year, and the Patriots attacked those weaknesses. So, it's nothing to overreact about. They've just got a couple things to clean up, I think, to be that true Super Bowl team. I'm confident that they will. I think Jalen Hurts played well enough in this game. Wasn't perfect. He left some meat on the bones of a couple plays. It does feel like Jalen Hurts just a couple plays a game where he's scrambling too early. The pocket presence for him, it's not that it's horrible, but it's not great. You know what I'm saying? He had another play where Goddard was wide open. It was one of those classic shot plays where you got a bender going, intermediate to deep, and then you've got the deep post, and it's a cover 3 beater. You put the safety in a bind. He either takes the crosser or he takes the post, and you're supposed to throw it to the other one. Well, the safety took the post, and Jalen Hurts still threw the post. Threw it up into double coverage when Dallas Goedert was wide open. So it's like, small stuff that Hurts is just a imperfect quarterback at times. All just very little minor nitpicks about an Eagles team that I otherwise feel really good about. And again, they won this game. So it is what it is. Jalen Carter was nasty in this game. He had 9 pressures, I think, 1 sack. Now, I'm not going to say it's got an asterisk, but the context to it is it was against 2 rookie day 3 guards that were not good pass protectors coming out in City So and Mafi out of UCLA. And the funny thing, too, is it was all in the same pass rush move for the most part. It was that, stick them with your hands and then use his quickness and swim. Like, he wins with that so well. His swim move is so nasty with his power and quickness. But it was like the first time since I was thinking back to Adrian Claiborne once for the Atlanta Falcons had a 6-sack game against the Cowboys, and he beat a backup left tackle with the same cross chop move 4 times for a sack in the game. It just random memory made me think of that. Now, Jalen Carter's going to have a much better career than Adrian Claiborne, I think. But I do think you should put a little bit of context on this idea that he's already an elite defensive tackle. Definitely good signs early on, and he gets to go against the Vikings guards this week, so he might continue it. But yeah, that's my breakdown of that game. Next up, we've got Niners at Steelers. Holy goodness. This was a smackdown by the 49ers. This was a statement, we are here to win the Super Bowl this season type of game from the Niners. Both sides of the ball relentless in this game. And I broke this down a decent amount with my co-host of my weekly show, Hot Routes, with Matthew Caller. We raved about the Niners there too. So Niners fans, if you want to hear even more, raving about your performance, go check out my live show with Matthew Caller, which, by the way, has been going great. If you're not following along every Tuesday at 5 o'clock, make sure you're showing up for that on the main YouTube channel. But, yeah, man, I mean, offensively, defensively for the Niners, that defense just has this hive mentality. They swarm to the ball, the way that they, twist and loop and stunt up front. It does not stop. It's like you're surrounded by a bunch of killer hornets, and it suffocates you. And it helps the guys in the back end capitalize on mistakes. And it's just the best way to capture this is, so a 60 PFF grade is like an average expected baseline performance. And usually in a game you have a couple players, even guys rotating in for 2 or 4 snaps. You at least have a couple players that had some negatively graded plays. The Niners didn't have a single player out of 20 have a below 60 PFF grade. And the 2 worst grades were Austin Bryant and George Odom, who aren't starters that were rotating in, and they still graded above a 60. So this team, they all lift each other up, and it's incredible that they did this in their first game without DeMeco Ryans. The show just goes on in San Francisco. Offensively, they did their thing. We know what Shanahan does as a play caller. We know what Christian McCaffrey is, George Kittle, Debo. But if you had 2, I don't even want to say question marks necessarily, but 2 areas of the offense where you're like, if they're going to take a next step, these are the guys that have to do it. And that was Brock Purdy and Brandon Ayuk. And those 2 guys were the guys that actually stole the show for the offense. Ayuk was unguardable, making difficult catches. He looks like he's poised to take a leap towards being a number 1 wide receiver, which he's more than physically capable of. And he's going to be an interesting case to follow because I don't know how much money the Niners still have after giving Nick Bosa all of that money. But I can't imagine Brandon Ayuk, if he plays well this year, is going to want to play on the 5th-year option for $13 million or whatever because he's playing like a $25 million receiver right now. But I guess having Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant, playing for $900K certainly helps. And, watching Brock Purdy, I continue to be impressed. I liked him coming out at Iowa State. I've certainly had my pump the brakes moments. I don't think I've ever been low on Brock Purdy. I think there's some Niners fans that want you to just jump on and say he's a franchise quarterback right away. I certainly still had some hesitations there. But he just continues to check boxes the more and more he plays and the more we see him. I felt about him coming out of Iowa State, I was like, he's a great quarterback. He just doesn't have a quarterback's body. He can't throw the deep ball. He doesn't have a strong arm. And that's exactly what we're seeing from him in the NFL. He might have the worst arm talent out of not just the 32 starters in the NFL, but of a large handful of backups. And it has its limitations. There's a play in this game where they call a cover 2 beater, and the whole shot's there, and he just doesn't pull the trigger. Trying to hit that honey hole down the sideline, the split between the flat zone defender and the 2-high defender, the play call is there, the throw is there, and he just doesn't even really want to attempt it because his margin for error is so slim. And that buys a little extra time for that safety to get over and make that play. But he is a great quarterback trapped in an untalented quarterback's body. He sees the field extremely well. The game moves in slow motion for him at times. The pocket movement is exceptional. He extends plays. He's got enough athleticism to get out of the pocket and do stuff with his feet. So, as long as they have these players around him, he can certainly play at a pretty high level for this team. And you might, in the back of your mind, be worried about the 2027 San Francisco 49ers. But with the way this team is constructed right now, this can get them a Super Bowl this year as long as they stay healthy. So they looked just fantastic. For the Steelers, I'm not worried about their defense. They ran into a buzzsaw and they were on the field the entire game. But that's where I'm worried about the offense, right? It's just the combination of play calling that we've been critical of. The lack of ability to adjust and find counterpunches to this Niners defense is concerning. The lack of creativity is concerning. But Kenny Pickett wasn't great in this game either. Definitely looked overwhelmed, made some mistakes. I still like Kenny Pickett, but for a quarterback that had a lot of hype that he was going to look even better this year and this offense was going to be taking a step forward, certainly doesn't feel really like that. This, to me, is going to have to be a team that is going to have to be able to run the ball better than they did. Have a defense that can play better than they did and keep the game close so that you don't put Kenny Pickett in these tough drop-back situations against one of the best defenses in the NFL. They ran into a buzzsaw. I rank the Niners number one in my rankings for a reason. Pittsburgh was overwhelmed, and they're going to have to go back to the drawing board, but I'm not writing them off for the season or anything like that. I still think they're going to be a tough out any given week. Okay, our next game, Jacksonville at the Indianapolis Colts. This was another really fun one. Let's start by talking about the rookie, Anthony Richardson. That's what everybody wants to hear about, right? What was my impressions? And it looked, I would say, like close to what, as someone that really liked Richardson, close to what I expected, if not just a little bit better. I thought he looked comfortable. That's the biggest thing here. The speed of the game definitely didn't seem too big for him. He was getting through his reads. His release, man, is so fun. It's about as close to like Aaron Rodgers as I can remember, where it's just that flip of the wrist. And then some guys have, like Jimmy Garoppolo's got a similar quick release, but the ball doesn't explode out of Jimmy Garoppolo's hand like it does Aaron Rodgers. Like that is a weapon for this Colts offense, especially in this kind of spread style scheme, where I felt like they had a good play calling balance with the RPOs and kind of the quick hitting stuff that is an extension of the run game. I also felt like they had a good balance in terms of leaning into his mobility. I don't think you want to do it too much. Like you still want him to develop as a passer and all this stuff, but it's also a weapon for your team and you're still trying to win games. And it's a good weapon to have throughout the course of his career. So like I felt like they had a good balance. I don't know the exact number, but felt like maybe 6 or 7 designed runs for Richardson, maybe a little bit less. It was a good balance. And I think he's going to be good, man. I do. I think he wants to throw from the pocket first. And he made some throws over to the middle of the field, kind of seeing those throwing windows developing. With just, some good balls. It wasn't all perfect, though. This was kind of the Anthony Richardson experience at Florida. There was just a couple plays a game where you're like, you got to clean that up, whether it was a decision here or an inaccurate pass there. And that's kind of what we saw. He I would say, made the least mistakes out of the main rookies this week. He had one interception that was just a tough read. Tried to sneak it behind his own defender and the defender made the play. Just the guy wasn't open. He wasn't NFL open. And then there was another missed throw over the middle of the field. Good read, trying to hit a deep dig, but totally left it behind Michael Pittman. Made it an impossible catch for him. So, just a couple little things here and there. It's not like he's got this crazy good offensive line, in pass protection at least, or this crazy run game or these great playmakers. Like, it's not going to be a perfect season for Richardson, but I also don't think they're going to break him either. And the pairing with Shane Steichen's really nice. So it was fun to watch. I'm so excited to see his career progress because I think he is in the perfect scheme for his skill set. And now it's just like we got to put a couple more players around him. And speaking of which, Michael Pittman is a player. He is a weapon. It's crazy. Some guys are just faster when the ball is in their hands and you can't explain it. But when Michael Pittman gets the ball in his hands, he's got a second gear. He outran the entire Jags defense for a touchdown, and everybody was looking like, whoa, that 6'4" guy can move like that. He accelerates really well. Amon-Ra St. Brown's kind of like that too, both USC guys. I guess it's something in the water in Southern California, but if he could manage to tap into that deep speed as a route runner and a vertical threat, I mean, you've got like something like Mike Evans there, but for some reason he can't quite separate like that as a route runner, at least trying to stack corners and win vertically. But Pittman was really good. He's gonna be a fantasy star this year. Like he's gonna get a lot of targets. He's gonna have some big plays. He's gonna score a lot of touchdowns because they don't have a whole lot of other guys to throw the ball to here. Alec Pierce, not a great start for him. The other thing is the run game. Like, look, I like Deion Jackson. I thought he had a chance to maybe be a guy for them, but 13 carries for 14 yards in this game, some bad reads, a lack of power. Him, Jake Funk, Evan Hull. Like, this was a good game for Jonathan Taylor to come back this week and be like, this will look a lot better when I'm out there. Just pay me. And you've got a quarterback on a rookie contract. I'm not always team pay running backs, but get JT back here happy, figure it out. It's not like Jonathan Taylor is worth $14 million. I genuinely believe that. You look at some of these other backs around the league, Christian McCaffrey, Austin Eckler, Aaron Jones, what Bijan's doing. Like, I really think Jonathan Taylor is that level of running back. Just bring him in. Give him 3 years, $54 million, whatever, and have some fun here. Like, they need another weapon here to open this thing up. I would love to see it. It's just kind of a buzzkill on the run game that should be much better with a guy like Anthony Richardson in there, and they just don't have competent backs right now. And that's saying a lot in a league where there's tons of competent backs. Now, they're hoping to get Zach Moss back, and maybe that is a meeting in the middle there between lack of competency and superstardom, but still, I would bring back JT. As for, and by the way, the Colts defense played a really hard game. Samson Ebukam is a fire starter for a defense. The energy he brings is infectious, and I think he is a very welcomed addition over a guy like Yannick Ngakoue, who's a third down only player. Samson Ebukam, every single play, is getting after it, and he's rocked up and physical and instinctive, and you feel his presence on the D-line. Which, by the way, I didn't even mention that Drake Jackson replaced him at a really good level in San Francisco. Very similar-minded player. But as for the Jags, Trevor looks ready to rock. All of the hype about this Jags offense maybe looking like one of the better ones in the league this year lived up to it. I mean, Trevor was very aggressive, almost a little too aggressive for my likings. A couple throws that were like, ooh, a defender almost got his hand on that. But some of them are also throws where like he knows he can fit that window and he's throwing it for a reason. But he is a guy that I think until we get years into his development and get more to watch from him, like he's probably going to throw some picks. Maybe once a game, he's going to put the ball in harm's way. He trusts his arm, he trusts his reads, kind of like a supercharged Tua, physically speaking, in a lot of ways. But at least in terms of his decision making. But anyway, the play extension is there with Trevor. He had the rollout touchdown to Calvin Ridley that was just beautiful. Like, he's ready to rock. I really think Lawrence has a good chance of finishing as a top 5 quarterback this year, and this was a good start. Big game against the Chiefs this week, man. And then the Calvin Ridley hype. I mean, you could just tell getting that piece for this offense. It opened up the passing game, elevated everybody. Ingram made a couple plays. Zay Jones made a couple plays. Not really sure where Christian Kirk was. I think he's going to be the biggest drop-off this year. Kirk's a good player for what he is, but they funneled a lot of their offense through him because they kind of had to last year because he was the guy with the speed and the route running. Well, now that's Calvin Ridley. So I do think Kirk is a sell candidate for your fantasy leagues for sure. He'll have better weeks than he did this week, but I do think he'll take a hit. I will say Doug Peterson was frustratingly adamant on running the ball in this game. They had a ton of running failures in this game, short yardage failures, just bad rushing attempts. I just felt like that was a poor job looking at the matchup where the Colts actually have a good front six, right? They got Grover Stewart, DeForest Buckner, Kwity Paye, Samson Ebukam, Shaq Leonard played in this game. They got linebackers galore. Their secondary is probably the worst in the league, though. And the Jags were having success through the air. They weren't having success on the ground. Before the long Travis Etienne run at the end, where he kind of broke free as the Colts are getting a little over-aggressive trying to get a stop late in that game, and their rushing discipline broke down. Travis Etienne splits it out and gets a huge rushing touchdown. Before that, they were at like 2.7 yards per carry, and they weren't blocking things up front. They had some guys injured on the O-line. Brandon Sheriff goes down in this game, by the way. I haven't heard anything there. It didn't look good. So Jags fans, you'll have to let me know in the comments what happened there. I guess I could look it up myself, but I'm going to publish this and then finally get to go play Starfield. So you guys can just let me know. But anyway, I thought Doug was a little bit over adamant on running the ball. I didn't think Tank Bigsby looked all that good. And long season ahead, but a couple plays where it felt like he was just running into a brick wall. Not a lot of creativity as a runner there. I wasn't a huge Tank Bigsby guy coming out. We'll continue to evaluate him as the season goes on, but he's a guy that had a lot of hype over the offseason that definitely didn't match what I saw from him at Auburn, kind of warranting third-round hype and being a big part of the offense here. Like, I get using ETN, but I don't know that a Tank Bigsby run into the Colts front is a better expected outcome than dropping back with Trevor Lawrence with these weapons. I just felt like they went a little bit too heavy on the run game. Nothing I want to overreact to, but I want to get it on the record in case they're a team that tries to run the ball too much this year, because I don't think that's their recipe for large success. So that's that game. Let's break down Bryce Young's rookie debut at the Atlanta Falcons. A lot to process here. And Bryce is going to get a lot of crap. He seems to be one of these quarterbacks that, whether it's Twitter or X or the talking heads, whatever it is, the football people at large, Bryce Young seems to be a quarterback that people want to pile on. There's a couple of these guys throughout the league, and it seems like Bryce Young is one of those guys, whether it's his size or the fact that people liked Stroud more in the draft. I don't know why it is, but it seems like Bryce Young's a guy that gets heavily nitpicked. Now, I'm a Bryce Young guy. I'm a Bryce Young believer. I don't want to go too far in on my guy here, but just based on what I watched, there was definitely some good and some bad. The positive thing is I think the good stuff is sustainable, and I think the bad stuff is very easy to clean up. He had really two bad plays in this game, ultimately. And they were really bad reads that cost his team the game. There's no way around it. They were huge interceptions that you don't want your quarterback making, and he cannot show that he's going to consistently make those mistakes. Now, they weren't like, I would say they weren't egregious. How do I want to word this? It's not like he was improvising and made some stupid effort throw, or he misread a coverage and, it was a bad initial read. What it was he's getting through his progressions and he gets to the backside dig, which I actually love that he's a rookie quarterback that gets criticized for not attacking the middle of the field. He works back to his backside dig in a way that a lot of quarterbacks don't. Guys like Justin Fields just don't do that. And that's why you love Bryce Young, is the processing's there. But the difference is he's used to the SEC, where he's facing guys like Lewis Cine and all these SEC free safeties where they're playing 25 yards back and their coordinators are telling them, you stay deeper than the deepest, don't blow your coverage, don't blow this defense. And he gets to the NFL in his first start, and he has to go against the best single high free safety in the league in Jesse Bates, who in this game was Jesse Bates, Baits, because he was baiting Bryce Young into throws that he made consistently in college that he's going to have to be a little bit more cautious about. Now, you're slightly concerned that he did it twice in this game, literally the same play, where he reads one side of the field, comes to the backside dig, trusts that it's there, lets it go, and then it's, oh shit, Jesse Bates just picked me off. Something to monitor, right? That's the same one knock, the same scouting note, the same error in his game that was very costly in this game. He deserves criticism for it, but it's a very correctable thing where if you're going to, check that backside dig, you better know going into the week, like, how does that free safety for my opponent play this? Because some teams do have their free safety still stay way too deep. But some teams, when you got a guy like Jesse Bates, you're going to let him go make plays on those situations. And Bryce Young's going to have to learn to not make that throw. So it's something, it was a classic rookie mistake. And the beauty is we got his whole career to find out if that's going to be an error in his game, if he's not going to be able to see those guys because of his height, or if he does process those things and correct his mistakes and weed that type of stuff out. I would bet on the latter on that one. But on top of that, most of his dropbacks looked pretty good. It's not like he had a ton to work with down the field. But I felt like the same Bryce Young was there, the comfort level, the poise in the pocket, the sensing of pressure, navigating the pocket, the quick releases, the processing, the game, again, like Richardson, did not seem too big for him. And the fact that, the throws he made, the interceptions he made were because he, in kind of a twisted way, it's because he has good processing. It's because he, in general, believes that backside dig against cover 3 should come open, but it's still his responsibility to check that safety before he lets it go and make sure that guy's not snapping down on that backside dig. Because a lot of games, it will be open, right? But, yeah, I'm not really all that discouraged by Bryce Young. You hate to see rookie mistakes, but they were rookie mistakes. So, as far as the rest of the Panthers team is concerned, I didn't feel like they were a well-coached team. They had a lot of pre-snap mistakes, false starts. I also disagreed with a lot of the game management stuff. Like early in the game, they're driving, and they go for it on 3rd and 1 and 4th and 1. They go for it, but they just have these lousy inside runs, predictable inside runs that get stuffed, turnover on downs. Fast forward to late third quarter, same exact situation. They're driving, they're capturing momentum, which, by the way, this game was really close until the very end. But they're driving, they have 4th and 1 in field goal range, but this time they kicked the field goal. And I'm like, what changed? You were aggressive early on. It's like for the blackjack players out there, you either always hit on 16 or you always stay on 16. And as long as you do the same thing over time, you're going to be right. Or at least you're going to give yourself the best chance to succeed. Don't try to read your instincts and say, this time it's going to be a 4. And then the next time it's going to be a 10 and I'm going to bust. No, do the same thing over time. Process over results. It's going to work over time. I don't get what changed, why you then kicked the field goal late in the game when you needed, a touchdown there is a game-changing drive, and you gain momentum, and I do believe in momentum. I think it's a real thing in the NFL. So I really disagreed with kicking the field goal later, and I disagree with the play calling when you went for it the first time. Good decision to go for it, but you've got a super mobile quarterback, and you're just going to run, what, Chuba Hubbard and Miles Sanders into a brick wall? I don't know. I would have loved to see at least on one of those dropbacks, let Bryce Young, put the ball in Bryce Young's hands and see what he can do. Maybe on 3rd down and then run it on 4th or something. I don't know, but I really disagreed with the game management there. It was very costly. You also have a Miles Sanders fumble in this game, 3 turnovers, a turnover on downs as well, which should just count as a turnover, by the way. But it was kind of a sloppy game across the board for the Panthers. Bryce Young had some sloppiness. The Panthers as a whole had some sloppiness. I do think the Panthers defense played really well. Ejiro Evero's group, I thought they had some really nice blitz designs, which Ejiro Evero's really good at. Brian Burns looked awesome. He looked bigger and stronger and ready to get paid. So I like that Panthers defense. No J.C. Horn. I think he left in this injury. He's a guy that's starting to feel a little injury prone. But hopefully he's okay. But, yeah, Brian Burns and Derek Brown are cornerstone, foundational pieces of a good NFL defense, and they played great. So I think the Panthers actually played a better game than they're getting credit for. I've seen them ranked in the bottom 3 or 4 in a lot of power rankings, and I don't think they're that much higher than that, but I think they're going to be a scrappy team. As for Atlanta, there was some frustrating moments for Atlanta in this game, but the overall takeaway is the playmakers here are super fun. Bijan, Pitts, Drake London, Tyler Algier. But the frustrating moments is the usage of those players. Kyle Pitts didn't see the amount of targets that he should, because every time he gets targets, he makes plays, as long as they're accurate throws. And part of it's on Arthur Smith not leaning into him. Part of it is the quarterbacks just haven't targeted him and haven't targeted him accurately over the last couple of years. And it was just more of the same. this week. Pitts made an incredible catch, though, that was game-changing. Ritter basically in trouble just chucked it up to him, and Pitts made it work. He's incredible, man. But, of course, Bijan Robinson looks as good as advertised. He looks like that dude, the dude that if he stays healthy is a Hall of Fame player. And some of these players in the NFL, they just have these little niches in their game that just they do things differently than other players. And with Bijan, it's that subtle jump cut. The way he can just change a lane and so effortlessly make a guy miss, it's so rare. And he's a special player, man. And I can't believe that they're giving Tyler Algier, even in week 1, like I just can't believe they're holding this offense back by giving Tyler Algier the ball. And Tyler Algier's a good back. Tyler Algier had some good runs in this game. But this is set up for Bijan to be an offensive player type of the year and an uncoverable running back in the NFL. You don't say that very often, but with the way that run blocking is, which was sensational in this game, and the way that this offensive scheme is set up to get Bijan involved, and it was good in this game. It was game-changing here. He had some huge plays, but this is set up to really be frustrating for teams to handle. And maybe now that they've seen it on an NFL field, it will be, 70-30 Bijan like it should be. But this game, it was like 60-40 Algier. Really no Drake London in this game at all. And I think part of that is Desmond Ritter was not particularly good. I'm worried about Ritter. I think his pocket presence sucks. He doesn't feel the rush. He doesn't have that natural poise in the pocket. He doesn't have a strong arm. He misses throws. I'm worried about him. I think you are getting the bare minimum out of this offense with him. And it's to the point that it's like, is Heineke so bad within the structure of the offense that you have to go with Ritter? Like, is Heineke really so bad that he can't hit Drake London on an open slant when he's your first read, or that he can't run quick game? Because I don't think he is. And Heineke brings a little bit more to the table in terms of making plays happen on third down. I think you would get more out of guys like Drake London and Kyle Pitts. I get that you want to see what you have in Desmond Ritter, but he was a third-round pick. Is he really the long-term plan? Maybe I'm overreacting, but I just don't see it with him. I really don't. He's got all the talent around him, though, to prove me wrong. So, I don't know, some good, some bad. I do think the additions to the Falcons secondary really thrived, especially with Jesse Bates won this game for this team. The 2 interceptions alone probably won the game for the team, but he also forced a fumble. 3 forced turnovers from Jesse Bates. The best free safety in the NFL restates his claim this week. But also some of the existing talent. Guys like Richie Grant made a nice pass breakup. A.J. Terrell was awesome in this game. He was locked down all over those Panthers receivers. So, I think the secondary for Atlanta is a strength. The front seven, I'm still very wait and see on that. But let's move on to our next game, the Rams at the Seattle Seahawks. This was a ring the bell moment for myself. I surprisingly, surprised a lot of people when I picked the Rams to win this game, and they come out and really dominated this game. I think the thinking there is, well, for now they're, I know Cooper Kupp's already hurt, but for now they're mostly healthy, at least with their quarterback, with Matthew Stafford. And when you have Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay and Aaron Donald, it's a pretty damn good baseline to at least be a solid team. And, maybe I ranked them a little bit too low coming into the year, but, I ranked them 30th. And the big thinking there is, can Stafford stay healthy on the season? But as long as he's healthy, this offense can cook, and was playing with a bit of a chip on their shoulder. And shout out to these receivers, man. They had weapons making plays. Van Jefferson had a big drop in this game, actually. And it was Puka Nacua and Tutu Atwell that stepped up for this Rams offense, and they were uncoverable for the Seahawks. Puka stepped in the Cooper Kupp role and was awesome. And you got to feel good there. I mean, Puka has injury questions and long-term durability concerns, but you got to feel good there, like almost to the point where, all right, let's say we get here to week 7, and maybe the Rams had a big moment here week 1. The offense is still looking pretty good, but you haven't won a ton of games. You're 2-6. You're 3 maybe you're even 4-4. But Puka keeps playing well. You're kind of rolling offensively. Do you put Cooper Kupp on the trade block? Because Cooper Kupp's 31. He's got this hamstring issue. Is that going to keep popping up? It's something to keep an eye on. I wouldn't be surprised because Puka Nacua really played the Cooper Kupp role so well, running out of the slot, the tough catches in traffic, being that reliable corner route guy for Stafford. I think Stafford went into that game like, I'm just going to pretend that Puka Nacua is Cooper Kupp. And he played like Cooper Kupp in this game. Now, can he repeat that? We'll see. But he was awesome. And then Tutu, a second-round pick that, I talked him up in the Rams deep dive. I was like, when they ask him to run routes down the field, he actually has played well and looked good at the end of last season. This is not a flash-in-the-pan performance for him. And when he came out of Louisville, I thought he was a gadget player. I thought he couldn't handle contact down the field. I thought he would drop issues. Like, I was really worried that he was going to be anything more than a jet sweep, play-action screen guy. And he has proven that wrong. He has proven that he is a legitimate playmaker in the NFL down the field. And they scheme him open on crossers and stuff and use his skill set well, but he can play. And I think Van Jefferson's a capable player. The drop sucks, but I think he's got better games ahead of him. You got Higbee underneath. This offense can work. This can be a sustainable group if they stay healthy. It's a fun team at this point in time. And the Rams defense was kind of fun, right? I mean, you got Aaron Donald as the base, who still looks like Aaron Donald. And then you got a bunch of these young players kind of stepping up. Kobe Turner out of Wake Forest played well in this game. Byron Young kind of surprisingly played well. I wasn't sure what his day one impact was going to be. He's a super athletic pass rusher out of Tennessee that is relatively new to high-level football. That's the guy that, went to a tryout for his local community college as he was working at the dollar store and worked his way up to Tennessee. 25-year-old prospect that came out this year, but incredibly athletic, talented player that, if he's learning some pass rush moves from Aaron Donald, he's got a chance to kind of be good quickly in the NFL because he is a physically mature player. Ernest Jones, the linebacker, is a good player at linebacker. Even this, Russ Yeast, who's been the laughingstock of, people making fun of this Rams defense, he played well in this game. They believe in him. They're just trotting out these young guys, giving them opportunities, and they stepped up in a big way in this game. So, big win for the Rams. I think they're at least they're not an easy out, right? At least until they're, as long as they're healthy, they're not an easy out. They're going to be a solid team. And I mean, again, I hate to keep coming back to the health thing, but it's a good thing. If they stay healthy, they could be a surprise, playoff team. I don't think they're going to dethrone the Niners, but they could be better than Seattle in the NFC West for sure. But it's week 1. We'll see where this goes. As for Seattle, Seattle's the one team that I think I'm most worried about because it's the D-line. I'm such a firm believer that a good pass rush is the best way to be sustainable, at least defensively. It's just so important. And Seattle just hasn't been able to get this right. They invested in Boye Mafe in the draft last year. They've got Darrell Taylor still there, a second-round pick from a few years ago. They bring in... God, I struggled with his name on the show. With why can't I think of the D tackle from Denver? I couldn't think of his name on the show with Matthew yesterday either. You gotta look it up. Goodness, I'm a mess. I just went to the Broncos depth chart. Let's go to the Seahawks depth chart. Draymond Jones, there it is. They bring in Draymond Jones from Denver, big contract. not a factor in this game. They draft the Auburn kid, Derek Hall, not a factor yet. If they can't get after it up front, I like this secondary. They're a solid secondary. We think they have insane potential as a secondary, but right now Witherspoon's not out there, and the only question mark on him was durability coming out. He's not out there. They're high first round pick. They got to get him out there. You got Reek Woolen, who we think is going to have a really good career, but we'll see where that goes. Diggs is an aging safety that I've always felt is slightly overrated from a coverage consistency standpoint. They're a fine secondary. Julian Love, decent player back there, but this isn't like a elite secondary that's going to make up for a bad pass rush, is what I'm getting at. They need guys up front that can speed up the quarterback's processor, force mistakes, get sacks, put the team in compromising dropback situations. Right now, you can run on this team, and you can have time to throw against this team. And until that changes, you're basically counting on Geno Smith to win shootouts. And how reliable can that be? And I'm worried. I'm worried about the Seahawks. And they got to play the Lions offensive line this week. That's the matchup to watch right there. Is can the Seahawks D-line step it up? Because they've invested in that group, but those guys have not played up to their hype. Let's get to Tennessee at New Orleans. This was kind of a messy game. Where do we want to start? Let's start with the Saints. The Saints had a pretty encouraging start, I would say. They definitely are not perfect, but I think the Derek Carr passing game, when it was blocked up, looked pretty good, right? You got Rashid Shaheed, looks absolutely legit. Chris Olave, Michael Thomas, as far as I'm aware, made it through the game. They got playmakers. Derek Carr can play within structure. But the offensive line for the Saints, paired with Derek Carr, who, as we saw on what was the worst call of the week, on a strip sack touchdown for the Tennessee Titans defense. It's what it was. It's clear fumble, clear recovery, clear touchdown, blown dead and not reversed for some reason. It was one of those, the call stands. They couldn't overturn it for some reason. Horrible, game-changing call from the refs in this game. And I hate doing the refs thing, but when it's a play that literally should have been a touchdown for the defense that was blown dead for no reason, and the offense ends up with a field goal out of it, that is a literal 10-point swing on a play that you reviewed. It makes no sense to me how that is allowed to happen. But anyway, back to the offensive line for the Saints. You got two liabilities. One of them is a first-round pick that you gave the Eagles Jalen Carter for in Trevor Penning, who was horrible in this game. And one of them is a guard that you just paid a massive contract extension to that was not good in this game, Cesar Ruiz. Completely head-scratching contract there. Yeah, they got O-line issues. And Derek Carr is not a quarterback that you want to have O-line issues for. I don't think you need deeper analysis than that. Raiders fans are laughing watching this game as Derek Carr gets strip-sacked, not moving in the pocket, because that's who he is. He is a flat-footed, timid passer that needs a clean picture. You give him a clean picture, he's got a good arm, he can read defenses, he can be a fine player. And we saw when those plays were there, they had some good offensive moments. But you got to increase the rate in which you're giving them those moments because Derek Carr is who he is. Defensively, they played great. Personally, I thought it was more about Tannehill playing horrible than it was about the Saints defense playing great. But to their credit, the defensive line took advantage of a favorable matchup. That Titans O-line, I think we ranked 32nd across the board coming into the year. So, it's good for the Saints defense, but let's see it again against a more competent offensive line, right? But, guys like Passignon and Carl Granderson, who's an underrated player for them. Even, Cam Jordan looked fresh and good to start the year. I do have questions on if they can get those types of performances from the D-line every week. But if they do, the guys in the secondary, Marshawn Lattimore especially, are awesome. And I think it's fun that they released Bradley Roby so that they can let these young guys like Taylor and Adebo thrive. It's a risk, but I like those guys, Taylor and Adebo. Those guys didn't necessarily have the most amazing games this week, but I think they're good players. And Lattimore was shut down in this game. So, the Saints did some good stuff. Good team win. They got it done. I am a little bit worried about my Titans take. I felt pretty good about the Titans winning this game. And granted, if the refs get that call right, they do. But I thought the offense would be a little bit more competent. I really did. I trusted that Tannehill could at least get back to like solid quarterbacking. And that does not appear to be the case. He seems to be a little bit broken right now. Stupid decisions, inaccurate throws. He looked really bad. He looked so bad that if he plays like that again for the next couple weeks, you've got to bench him. Because I don't know if Willis or Levis would be worse than that. I really don't. He was horrible. He lost this team the game with just stupid decisions time and time again and bad throws time and time again. But also like not a lot of offensive creativity to get guys like Chig and Burks going. It really was just some big Derrick Henry runs that set them up to score. So definitely worried that this Titans offense could be like bottom 3 in the league. And this is the type of game the Titans are going to be in all year because the defense was every bit as good as advertised for the Titans. I mean, they're good across the board. They're extremely well coached. But they're a team that like needs things to land their way to win. And you get a bad call, and that's the difference in this game. You don't want to be a team that you're counting on the refs to make the right call every time to win games. Because otherwise you're going to end up with these types of results. So kind of an ugly, sloppy game that I don't have a ton of takes about, I guess. Mostly just worried about Ryan Tannehill coming out of that one. And the Saints O-line. All right, Arizona at Washington. A lot of eyes on Sam Howell in this game. Essentially his rookie debut. Like, I guess that could have been the game against Dallas last year, but this was like, okay, this is his team. He's been practicing with the ones. This is, in my eyes, like his first real start. Not that I'm just throwing out the game against Dallas last year, but anyway, looked like you probably expected. If you're like me and you're 1 foot in, 1 foot out on the whole Sam Howell idea and you just are excited to see it, this is basically what you would expect. Where there's certainly some good. For what it's worth, he does seem to see the field well. He had like a million throws into the intermediate part of the field, which is to me just a good sign that you are comfortable reading zone, getting the ball out on time, playing in rhythm. A lot of good there. A lot to work with. He also had some really exciting plays with his feet, which was what he did at North Carolina, right? He had the play extension rolling left, where last second he gets rid of the ball. Beautiful touchdown, great play. Triple thumbs up on that one. Also scrambled for a go-ahead touchdown in the fourth quarter. So you got a lot of good stuff, and then you got some ugly stuff. He takes a strip sack fumble in this game that resulted in a touchdown. Just sloppy. Doesn't need to happen. You're in the NFL. Like, don't try to make too much happen. They will come for that football, and they will take it from you. He had, right before half, they're trying to get at least in field goal range in 2-minute drill, and he had an aggressive read that was extremely close to being a game-changing pick six before half. Very dangerous throw. And then he had a couple, like literally just 2 intermediate passes that were inaccurate. One on a dig, very similar to Anthony Richardson, where he leaves it behind him. And then one on a deep corner where he overthrew it to the sideline. So we're just going to keep watching. I'm not making any big statements about Sam Howell. Some good, some bad. Thought it was fun. Thought he was okay. Now, I want to circle back to the Cardinals first, actually. No, that doesn't make sense. Let's talk about the rest of the Washington team, and then we'll talk about the Cardinals, because I think the Cardinals did some fun stuff. But I made a statement in the power rankings this week that I really regret. I'll just be honest. I'll just open up. I'm exhausted. I cranked out the deep dives, put in about 80, 90 hours a week for the last 2 weeks of the offseason. Week 1, hits, trying to soak everything in. I updated my power rankings graphics. I did my recording at about 2:30 in the morning, and I made a statement that the Washington defense didn't play all that great. And I regret that. I pride myself on, if I say something on this channel, it's because I watched it on a football field. It was a well-thought take, and I believe in it. That one was, for the first time in a long time, I just said shit to fill the space, and I regret it. Washington's defense played well, and it was against the Cardinals, and I think the run defense could be cleaned up a little bit, but Josh Dobbs is not an NFL quarterback, not a starting NFL quarterback. He just is one of those backups you watch, and it's just all over the place. But pass rush was good. Montez Sweat was sick. Josh Allen was sick. Deron Payne was sick. Thought the secondary was sweet. I've been excited about how Emmanuel Forbes is going to look in this defense, and he looks like such a sweet fit. I didn't mind that pick entirely. I think he is going to be a pretty solid player here. Kendall Fuller, was good. The safeties were good. Even a guy like Percy Butler making plays back there. I love that duo back there with Curl and my dude, Derek Forrest. But even a guy like, they have an interesting slot rotation. They got a bunch of guys. They got Percy Butler. They got Benjamin St-Juste, a Gopher, who I love. And then they even have their second-round pick, Jatavis Martin, who I don't think played much. I didn't see him out there. But, yeah, their defense is theoretically going to be very scary. It was against the Cardinals. Well, let's see more of it. And let's see more of it let's see if Chase Young can get back out there. Because, man, what the hell? I didn't even realize he was going to be inactive until game day. But anyway, I wanted to apologize for that. Because, defense played well, as they should have, but they lived up to it. One other thing on the Commanders, Ron Rivera did not challenge a play at the end of this game that I was like, really? You're not going to challenge that? What are you doing here? If it's Jack Del Rio, that's unfair. But, it's Jack Del Rio and his defense. He's a defensive head coach. But pretty sure Jack Del Rio is calling the plays and orchestrating the defense when the game's happening. I could be wrong about that. But if you're not calling the plays on defense, you're not calling the plays on offense, shouldn't you at least be spot on in terms of your game management and when to challenge? What the hell was this? The Commanders had a screen to Gibson that basically ended this game with 3 minutes left. Should have been a first down. Looked to me like they clearly got the spot. And it's hard to tell exactly what happened because I watched this on the condensed game, and sometimes they cut out some of the intermediate jumbo stuff. So maybe he did challenge this and they didn't overturn it. Please let me know if I'm wrong about this, but in the condensed game, there was none of that. It went straight from, looked like Gibson got it by a half a yard, straight to their punting. Was there no challenge in between there? And I don't think they burned their challenges throughout the game so that they couldn't challenge it, but that should have been an easily challenge, play overturned, he got the first down, all you need is another first down and the game's over. And it almost cost them the game, you guys, because they end up punting, and then the Cardinals are driving on this defense, and Josh Dobbs fumbles a snap that the Commanders fall on, and the game's over. But if he doesn't fumble that snap, Commanders could have lost that game, and we're looking back on that saying, why did you not challenge that play? So that was a big one for me. I'm so not sold that Ron Rivera is a great coach anymore. But let's talk about the Cardinals a little bit. I was kind of impressed. No, let's not sugarcoat it. I was impressed. I thought they'd get their ass beat. I thought this would be a disaster with Dobbs coming in with a completely motley crew of random players on defense. And I want to give Jonathan Gannon some credit because I've been very skeptical about him. I have bought into this idea that, you see his silly interactions with the players in these clips that the Cardinals put out, and you're like, he looks like a goof. And I don't know if the players in an NFL locker room are going to buy into him. But they took the field on Sunday, and they looked like they were bought into their new defensive head coach. They were flying around. I thought to Jonathan Gannon's credit, their blitz packages were awesome. Like, that is one thing as I was watching Eagles tape late in the season into the playoffs. I did think their blitz designs were really good. I just didn't know necessarily where to attribute the credit on that because you had Vic Fangio in the building. But this is Gannon on his own showing that maybe he deserved a little bit more credit for some of those really good blitz designs that they ran. They schemed up some phantom pressures where you're getting unblocked defenders and causing numbers problems. That to me is the most valuable thing a defensive coordinator can bring to the table is good blitz designs. Because you can completely change the numbers. If you're good enough at this, you can rush 4 and get a guy unblocked. Like, that's a dream, right? So he had a couple blitzes where I was like, okay, Gannon, I see you. And I see that defense with a bunch of random-ass players. I mean, they have Kayvon Wallace, who they picked up, I think, just like a couple days ago, starting, or at least out there for significant snaps, a guy that was with Gannon in Philadelphia that ended up getting cut. They bring him in. He's making plays. Like, these guys are flying around the field playing hard for Jonathan Gannon. I got to respect that. Like, it's very eerily familiar to Nick Sirianni, who's getting criticized for his weird, press conferences, and then the team likes him. So I'm initially impressed by Gannon. I want to give him credit. I'm going to pump the brakes on this being a bad hire because they impressed me in the opener. Now, it's week 1. We'll see where this goes. But I think they also did have some surprise performances. Before I get positive, though, I do have one negative note on the Cardinals defense. I don't get the whole Zaven Collins edge thing. I just don't. I know it's a more valuable position, but he was credited with 0 pressures in this game. I thought he should have had 1, though. He did have 1 nice pass rush snap in this game, but still, it's just 1 snap. Like, the one main good play he had in this game was dropping into coverage and getting a pick that was tipped to him, but still, he's shown a lot of promise as a linebacker. I don't get moving him to edge. Like, he was a good blitzer in college. Like, maybe this proves out. But I don't see this as moving some super athlete like Micah Parsons or Baron Browning to edge and having success there. I don't think Zaven Collins is that type of an athlete. I don't know. I don't get that whole thing. We'll see how that plays out. It is funny, though, how announcers will gas up the fans. Like, so Zaven Collins gets this interception. He drops into a hook zone from the edge, and someone at the line deflected the pass, and Collins still had to get there. He still had to be in position, but it wouldn't have been an interception if the ball wasn't deflected. But he gets this pick, and the announcers say, "That's a budding superstar." in Zaven Collins. Like, I don't know about that. I don't know about budding superstar. He's a nice player, but I do love how announcers will gas up their fans. They also, the Cardinals, like I have some other positive notes. They had some individual player performances that are guys I'm going to keep an eye on here. Dennis Gardick, veteran pass rusher. I wasn't sure if he was going to make this team because he was one of Vance Joseph's guys, but he didn't just make this team. He's out there starting. He had 2 really nice sacks in this game, was working that offensive line in this game. He was really good. I don't know that he'll be able to play like that every week, but he was a game changer for this defense. Marco Wilson, one of my favorites, young corner that has just had a lot to learn in the NFL, but looks like things are coming along for him. Super athletically talented corner, had a good game. Victor Demukage, what a 26th round pick out of Duke, was awesome in this game. He had a big sack. Granted, someone did trip the guard that he was on, so take it with a grain of salt. But he also had a beautiful peanut punch forced fumble. He's starting on the edge for this team. He's their listed starter off the edge. So he seems to be earning some playing time and making a name for himself. So, there's some interesting names on this defense. That's really what you're looking for in a season like this. It's like that first year Dolphins team with Flores, where it's all these random dudes from all over the place. And you're just trying to find role players and low-end starters to build around for next year. And those are, at least in the first start, those are some names that look like maybe could be that. Let's move on. We've got, 5 more games here? 6 more games? Tampa Bay at Minnesota is next. And this game was about as sloppy for the Vikings as I kind of predicted in my weekly picks. I also had the Bucs on upset alert, and it ended up coming true. But I'm not terribly worried about this game from the Vikings. I think this was more about the Bucs' defense is still a thing. You've got Todd Bowles with a staff and a bunch of players that are very familiar with this system. You've got Shaq Barrett coming back. You've got the rookie addition to the D-line in Kalijah Kancey looked good, had 2 pressures in this game before he left for an injury. Devin White had an awesome game in coverage. Credit to Devin White, who I'm not easy on. He had a great game in coverage. These guys in the back end, Jamel Dean and Carlton Davis, Antoine Winfield, they got dudes on this defense. And they looked like a team that played pissed against a more squishy, soft Vikings offensive line that was dealing with a ton of injuries in this game. And they brought it. Still wasn't perfect. They still gave up some big throws, some big plays to Justin Jefferson. But they did enough on that side of the ball. And, Baker made enough plays happen. And I think this is a team that can muddy games up like this, play good defensive football, get some throws from Baker, expect some mistakes from Baker. And, they're a tough team to kind of have a strong take on, but they're probably going to be a pretty solid football team. Baker's going to be the big wild card there. He's just been so unbelievably inconsistent for 2.5 years now. So it's just difficult to have any big reactions because he was, again, solid in this game, but it's just tough to have any big overreactions out of one game from him at this point. So still wait and see with the Bucs offense. I do want to say Sean Tucker is the best running back on this football team, right? Bucs fans? How long are we going to do the Rashad White thing? Because it wasn't pretty last year. And now you have a talented, undrafted player coming in that should not have been undrafted. Sean Tucker, I think, is going to take over his backfield by week 5. That's kind of a prediction here. As for the Vikes, they had a couple of fumbles in this game that really were the main difference. Other than that, I think this is, offensively at least, the same Vikings. We're going to get some big Justin Jefferson plays. Offensive line's going to be mostly good with some frustrating losses on the pass protection. Now, the injuries didn't help. Darrisaw left. Their center left. Ed Ingram, still a problem for them. They got some O-line issues at the moment. I think they can clean some stuff up, but I do think it's very frustrating that he's still out there, by the way. You can still go and get Dalton Reisner. They brought him in for a visit. Why the hell did this team stand by Ed Ingram? Horrible pick at the time. Horrible since he's been on the field, still starting. It's really mismanagement at this point to keep him out there. And he's going to get, I think, obliterated and embarrassed by Jalen Carter tomorrow night. But, you got some issues on the O-line, but we kind of know what this offense is. It's another team that they played in so many close games last year. It was another close game. They finally lost a close game in Minnesota. I was intrigued by their defense. I actually think this defense has a good chance to be slightly improved. Now, it was going against the Bucs offense, so I want to take this with a grain of salt, but you can just tell between the Vikings here and the Browns, these two schemes that were these soft, squishy Fangio schemes, getting a coordinator that trusts you to make plays, that wants you to play fast, wants you to play aggressive, and play defense like you mean it, it has a tangible effect on your defense. And these guys were flying around in the back end, playing pretty well. I think of Caleb Evans, Byron Murphy, they held up okay in a matchup that, you had to deal with Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, and they held up pretty well. Wasn't perfect, but they held up pretty well. The big completion to Evans was a safety miscommunication on the back end. So they played well, and I love some of the blitzes they brought. Avon Pace played 46 snaps, the blitzing specialist linebacker out of Cincinnati. Such a great fit for an undrafted free agent to come in, win that starting job, and he's a fun player. And then they based their defense out of 3 safety packages. I love that. This is why Brian Flores is so fucking good. He's able to look at his team and say, we don't have the corners to run base nickel, but I like this Josh Metellus guy to be kind of this box safety. And they're going to do a lot of that kind of Belichickian 3 safety defensive stuff where they're able to cause some confusion with different rotations. So it's a great example of how coaching matters so much. We'll see how this ages. We'll see how they handle the Eagles offense here on Thursday night. But I was encouraged by what we saw on that side of the ball. It is kind of embarrassing, though, that in a 3 safety defense, Lewis Seen can't find a way to be one of those starters. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like he's a guy I just didn't like coming out of Georgia. I don't want to get into it too much, but he never made plays. He just played in a defense that was so easy for him to just play deep, run super fast like he can. He's a 4.3 speed guy. Run fast and don't miss the tackle. He had about as easy of a job as I've ever seen for a safety. Was really surprised the Vikings took him in the first round. And he's not able to start here in year 2. That's not a great look for him and for the front office, but that's besides the point. Both these teams have a full season ahead of them. I don't know if this game meant a whole lot for either the Bucs or the Vikings. Then we had a really good division battle between the Raiders and the Broncos. And Jimmy Garoppolo, not so bad, huh? Moves around in the pocket a little bit, made some plays, looked comfortable with this offense. Him and Jacoby Myers have a little back shoulder chemistry. Josh Jacobs making some plays. Offensive line played great. Raiders have an offense. As long as Jimmy can stay healthy, the Raiders have an offense. I kind of alluded to this earlier, but Raiders fans, please, if you share this sentiment, because just as a neutral observer, what a freaking breath of fresh air to see a quarterback move in the pocket. Don't give up on plays the second it's not there. Like, he extends that play to win the game. There's nothing there, but he doesn't panic like Derek Carr would. He doesn't just chuck it up, ask his receiver to make a play, or he doesn't, throw the ball out of bounds, trust the defense. He doesn't take a sack. He just, while reading the play, Jimmy Garoppolo calmly steps up, makes the decision to run, edges it out, gets the first down, game over, no big deal. How freaking relieving is it to have a quarterback that can feel the pocket and not choke the second there's a pass rush? It's crazy how different these quarterbacks are. Now, Jimmy's not the downfield passer that Carr is. They both have different strengths and weaknesses, but honestly, I'd rather have the guy that can distribute the ball and on third down, give me a little bit. Give me a little bit of something, It doesn't even have to be 30 yards down the field. He had another one where he's rolling out and he kind of floats it to Devontae Adams in between the zone on I think it was a 4th down. Like, it's just those little plays, those clutch moments where he's cool and calm, and the speed of the game isn't too much for a guy like Jimmy G. So I appreciate that. It was really the deciding factor in this game when it came down to it. I thought the Raiders defense had a good team effort. This was a good kind of notch, a nice feather in Thomas Graham, right? No, Patrick Graham, the defensive coordinator. Nice little opening day for Graham, who I liked in New York and didn't have the best year for the Raiders last year. But there's not a lot of superstars on this defense. I thought they did get a really good performance from oh goodness, we're 2 hours into the show at this point. Name recognition's getting harder and harder. But Divine Diablo, how can I forget that name? Divine Diablo was awesome for the Raiders in this game. Like him, he's a really good athlete. One of these mid-round linebackers with a ton of athleticism that, give him a couple years to let the speed of the game come to them and understand the position. And he's got a lot of tools to be a really good player. So someone to keep an eye on there for them is Divine Diablo. But for the most part, it was, Max Crosby doing his thing up front like he does, and then just good, solid, disciplined team football to limit the runs, keep everything in front of them, and kept the score down enough for Jimmy G to seal the deal. It was a good team win for the Raiders. This was the type of game that they would lose last year. And I hate to do the QB wins thing, but when you look at that specific difference between how much you trust a guy like Jimmy G on third down versus how much you trust a guy like Derek Carr on third down when push comes to shove, this was the type of difference they were looking for when they moved off of Derek Carr and moved towards Jimmy G. And at least in week 1, it got them a win. So I do think this is a team that's going to have to win games close like this. But, good start for a team that's trying to prove people wrong. Now, for Denver, I was excited to actually, if you couldn't tell, I was really trying to hold back from saying anything about this offense. I hadn't watched them when we got to the Power Rankings show. I did for them what I didn't do for Washington and tried to control my words a little bit in a situation where I hadn't watched them play yet. And I was just excited to see what Russ was actually going to look like watching the game. Because he's, Russ is a guy that's always wanted these big chunk plays, play action shots. Now he's paired with Sean Payton, who is Drew Brees' coach, right? The dink and dunk, quick game stuff. What was this marriage going to look like? And I was really fascinated to see it. And I didn't even know what to expect, but I think it was a little bit better than I expected. Like, my expectations were kind of down the middle. I thought it might work. But I think they were a well-run offense. Now, it wasn't perfect. There's still some stuff I want to point out later. But number one was, exactly like I said, the lack of receivers running into each other, fumbled snaps, false starts, holding call, like just stupid shit that was happening with Nathaniel Hackett's offense last year. I said the baseline with those things getting weeded out and having a real, structured coach that's going to hold you accountable, that stuff was the lack of those things in this game. That alone made a big difference for this Broncos offense, just to not have those frustrating setbacks down in, down out. But then you also plug in this quick game stuff, and I think Russ can run quick game. For all the talk about he's too short, he doesn't like to get the ball out, I think he's, over the last couple of years, gotten better at it. Earlier in his career, I would have had some question marks of, can he quickly scan the field, have those quick releases, be willing to just operate quick game where it's got to be boom, 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 balls out. Like, no more than maybe 2.5 seconds to throw. And earlier in his career, when Russ can do all this crazy stuff, I think he was pretty uncomfortable with that. But I do think he looks very comfortable. The surveying of the field is very quick, very clean. The release, the confidence to do it. I, at this point, don't really have any questions about, can a Sean Payton quick game offense work with Russell Wilson? I think that's in pretty good shape. Now, what they are going to have to do is find a way to get more explosives out of this offense. And obviously getting Jerry Jeudy back should help, but they got to find the right marriage here, because Russ is a guy that can push the ball downfield, and you're going to want more explosives. You just are. And they weren't really there in this game. So I do think finding the right balance of shot plays and stuff, and they did have, a couple shot plays. They had one that They didn't connect on, but there was a pass interference, so it was a big chunk play. But they're going to have to continue to find that right balance. But, I think Russ looked like he was running the offense well, and also made a couple, I've started to call into question his pocket presence and sort of scrambling decision-making in terms of, are you bailing out of clean pockets? Are you running when you should? He didn't have that confidence last year in the offense. That was the biggest thing that felt off with Russ, really, was his decision-making in terms of when to run, whether it was him not running or whether it was him running too quickly. It was all over the place. But in this game, there was only one play where I was like, where are you going, Russ? You're bailing from a clean pocket. Now, unfortunately, that was late in the game on a third down in the red zone where he bailed immediately. And I'm like, wait, Russ, no. You've been so good in terms of pocket presence this game. Where are you going? But outside of that one play, he was moving. He was running when he should. He was navigating the pocket and staying in the play, trusting the play when he was supposed to. That's always been such a big strength of Russell Wilson. So I want to see that come back. And if he's starting to get more comfortable, maybe that will be fully back. I don't know. But I thought Russ was pretty solid in this game. I'm not really panicking at this point about him being a horrible quarterback. Maybe he's not going to get back to peak Russ, but I think they're in pretty good hands there. Defensively, I know the score was low in this game, but it didn't necessarily feel like a defensive game, if that makes sense. The time of this game was really short too. The clock was running in this, which helps keep the score down. But I think the Broncos had some good moments defensively. Patrick Surtain is freaking awesome. He's so good. He was locking down Davante Adams in this game. But, I'm a little bit worried about the Broncos defense. I like Demaryi Mathis as your number 2 corner, but he had a really rough game. Really rough game. No, not really any way around it. Got targeted 9 times, gave up 2 touchdowns, 90 yards. That's a big reason why Jacoby Myers had such a big game, because the Raiders were like, okay, you're going to put Pat Surtain on Davante? No worries. We got another guy that can dominate your number 2 corner. It's not ideal. But also, the pass rush for Denver, it was nowhere to be found. Randy Gregory didn't show up in this game. He played, but he didn't show up. They've got Baron Browning's, I think, suspended to start the season. They had 3 pressures in this game from defensive linemen. 3. That's not going to cut it. And I know the score was lower here, and the Broncos have been pretty good at keeping scores down, but they're going to need some more individual efforts, I think. And I mean, you got to call out Kareem Jackson. So Caden Stearns leaves this game, by the way. Caden Stearns, a really promising young safety. Looked like he had a season-ending injury. Got carted off. He was in tears. Felt horrible for the guy. Great opportunity for him this year to kind of take this starting job and show what he's got. That just sucks, because he's the kind of guy that was a mid-round pick that it's going to be tough for him to get that opportunity again necessarily. But anyway, Kareem Jackson's in there now, 14-year veteran, and he has an egregious leading with the helmet penalty that lost his team the game. They were going to get the ball back with 2.5 minutes to go, down by 1. And, what are you doing, dude? You've been in the league for 14 years. You should know better than this. So that was rough to see. But ultimately, it was a good division battle. I think both these teams are going to be very solid football teams. Going to have some close game losses. Going to have some close game wins. And yeah, I don't have a ton else to say beyond that. So next up, let's talk about Houston at the Baltimore Ravens. And let's start with the Ravens on this one. two teams that we didn't really know what to fully expect, because you obviously have rookie quarterback, rookie coach for the Texans, and then you have the Ravens that are like, overhauling this whole offense. So I was really excited to see what this offense was going to look like out the gate. And unfortunately, I don't have a whole lot of strong takeaways. It was a pro-style offense. It was a, kind of Shanahan-style offense, some play-action boots. You name it. They spread the ball out in shotgun. I like the style, but the results were hit or miss. Lamar just had some good, had some bad. He had a couple of beautiful throws in this game from the pocket, like real quarterbacking things that you love to see. One was the Texans were trying to disguise that it might be single high pre-snap, but they actually rotated into a cover two. Lamar recognizes it right away and hits Zay Flowers down the sideline on a strike in that honey hole of the cover two. He also had a really nice throw with anticipation on a deep corner to Odell that was just a dime that really helped seal the game. So there were some nice throws in there, both of them deep and outside the numbers, which, where do I always criticize Lamar? Deep and outside the numbers. So that was great to see. He did also have a really bad interception early in this game, throwing back across the field, late, stupid pick, just inexcusable. If this was a big game, you'd be slamming him for a decision like that. So that was pretty bad. Also was just like a little loose with the football. I don't know what to think about that, but I think he put the ball on the turf definitely 2 times, maybe 3. I don't know what was going on there. Is it because he's been in, is the ball handling a little different, going from a Greg Roman offense to a different offense with the play fakes and where the ball is being distributed? I don't know. It was weird. It felt like he had a hard time kind of holding on to the football, but the jury, I think, is still out on what this Ravens offense is going to look like. But one thing that the jury is not out on is Zay Flowers. Love me some Zay Flowers. And I saw people say, like, the Ravens missed out by not getting Jackson Smith and Jigba. And I've been saying, like, the JSN hype is just a little weird. Like, he's a really good player. I think he's a slot-only player. I don't think he's particularly explosive. I think in a best-case scenario, he could be Amon-Ra St. Brown, which is awesome. But that's a best-case scenario. I actually had Zay Flowers ahead of Jackson Smith and Jigba and really pushed back on this idea that he was a consolation prize, that they had to take Zay Flowers because Jackson Smith and Jigba wasn't available. I don't know about that, man. Zay Flowers, the way he moves is different. I really think he has a chance to be the best receiver in this draft. He's a vertical threat that can line up outside in the way that you wouldn't necessarily say that about Jackson Smith and Jigba. He has real speed. His run after catch ability is insane. I mean, he has a spin move in this game where he doesn't just make a guy miss, but he's able to reset after the spin and then continue accelerating away from pursuing defenders. He just glides in his routes. He glides with the ball in his hands. He's different. And he's probably already the best receiver on the Ravens. He's him, as the kids say. So yeah, target Zay Flowers if you can get him in your fantasy leagues. And then a couple more things on the Ravens. I will admit that I was overly critical of the Jadeveon Clowney signing. I was really curious to see how this would work. And this is one of those things that I can check week 1 and I know if I'm right or wrong. I was really skeptical that by signing Jadeveon Clowney, they would overuse him and underuse a guy like David Ojabo, who's a super talented year 2 player who missed his rookie season because of injuries, a pass rusher out of Michigan. There's a big year, they want to know if he can be a great pass rusher, right? David Ojabo. And they want to know maybe if this year he can be that. But I was worried that if they signed Jadeveon Clowney, they wouldn't use him enough. He wouldn't get those reps. He wouldn't develop. And David Ojabo played 28 pass rush snaps in this game. So really good, personnel usage. I should have given the Ravens a little more benefit of the doubt on that. They call it a progress stopper in the NFL. A lot of times when you sign a guy like Jadeveon Clowney, it's nice to get that baseline from a vet, but I think that was a Jim Parcells term, a progress stopper. He's taking the reps from a talented young player that could become a better player. But they seem to be balancing that really well here. So a credit to them. Now, the Ravens suffered a lot of injuries in this game. It's going to be something to keep an eye on. Tyler Linderbaum, their center, got hurt. Marcus Williams, their free safety, got hurt. Ronnie Stanley, their left tackle, got hurt. Marlon Humphrey already wasn't playing in this game. Mark Andrews didn't play in this game. And J.K. Dobbins is out for the year. Just devastating injury for him, by the way. Just sucks. He's fought to get back to this point. Looks good. And then he's done again. It's just, injuries just freaking suck, man, as we know. But I don't know why the Ravens can't stay upright, but they're struggling with it the last few years, that's for sure. But let's talk about C.J. Stroud, right? I thought this was, if you would have asked me, based on your scouting report on C.J. Stroud, what would a rookie debut for him look like? It would look a lot like this. If I wrote the C.J. Stroud opening script, it would look a lot like this, where there's some good. When the structure was there and he had pass protection and he had receivers getting open, he consistently hit it. And that's what you love about Stroud. That's why he was such a completely different prospect from Justin Fields coming out of Ohio State, where they have just different strengths and weaknesses. C.J. Stroud, the comparisons were like Jared Goff, where if the structure's there, he will read it out and he will hit it. If he's got time to throw and a clean platform, he's a good quarterback. And I felt like for this Texans team, we saw that. So that's good. Now, the Texans got to do a better job with the run game, over time getting them playmakers. I want to see more Tank Dell here. John Mechie didn't play in this game. I want to see him back out there. They got to do a better job giving him that structure. Because my big knocks on C.J. Stroud were pocket presence and decision-making out of structure. And those both showed up as issues for Stroud in this game. The pocket presence, the movement there, just wasn't good. He takes a strip sack fumble where he just doesn't sense the pressure. He's also trying to learn the same lesson. Like the thing that he's going to have to learn, we talked about Bryce Young's going to have to learn where that free safety is. Stroud's going to have to learn in the same way that Baker Mayfield learned. You were a good athlete in college. You're no longer a good NFL athlete. Maybe he's good, but and it's a little different. Baker went from a good college athlete to an average NFL athlete. Stroud went from a great college athlete to a good NFL athlete. But he's going to have to learn that he can't get away with the same stuff he did in college. That 300-pound defensive tackle that you see bearing down on you, yeah, that's Justin Madubuike. He ran a 4.8. Welcome to the NFL. You're not going to outrun him. That linebacker, it's fucking Roquan Smith, dude. You're not getting away from him. That backside edge that went unblocked, I hate to tell you, but that's a Dafe Owe who runs a 4.4. Like, everything's just faster. Like, he's going to have to get the ball out a little bit quicker when the pressure does get in, learn that he can't, always extend these plays. And there were some ugly moments, and some of those long third downs that they ended up in were his fault because he's taken sacks that he shouldn't. So that was his rookie learning moment for sure. But also the decision-making out of structure. There was a lot of times, there was only maybe 15 plays at Ohio State where C.J. Stroud actually had to break structure because it was so perfect. But if you pulled those plays, there's a lot of plays where you're like, whoa, dude, don't throw that. Like Jameis Winston type of F-it throws that just showed up on tape that you're like, you don't want to see him do that in the NFL. And he did that in this game. He rolls to the left and just chucks it up on 2nd and 5 in the middle of the second quarter. Like, dude, no. So it's like this. It's so, I don't want to keep, scouting the helmet and saying the Ohio State thing, but Fields is a recent example of a guy that, like, okay, we saw these issues in college. We've now seen them on tape in the NFL. Now it's like, will he clean those things up or will he not? So we'll see. Some good, some bad. As far as the rest of the Texans team, I really didn't have a lot to say about the Texans offense other than it was pretty much what we expected, with some offensive linemen out, not a lot of great playmakers there. Defensively, I thought they played hard, but they still have a long ways to go in terms of roster talent on that side of the ball. But this was really about Stroud making his debut, and the Texans are they're not a team that's going to be picking too far outside of the number one pick in the draft. I'll put it that way. They have a long way to go in terms of this rebuild, and that's what makes it so much more head-scratching that when given the choice of which first-round pick to send to the Cardinals between their own and the Browns, they made a decision to send the Browns' first-round pick. And I can't believe that. If they're passing, they legitimately could have had a chance to reunite C.J. Stroud with Marvin Harrison. And they pissed on it. Inexcusable. Absolutely unbelievable. This team's going to have a top 3 pick that they're giving to the Cardinals. They just have so far to go. And that's before we even talk about, was Stroud the right pick there? Would you have been better waiting on, a chance to maybe get Caleb Williams? I don't want to get too far ahead of myself that way, but it is kind of hard for me to not have some of those thoughts. But anyway, let's move on to our next game. This is really the last game that I have firm opinions on. That's the Miami Dolphins at the LA Chargers. And what a fun game, man. I saved this one for last for my film reviews. What a fun game. Back and forth game. The Dolphins doing it through the air, and really the Chargers doing it through the ground, which was a bit of a surprise. But let's start with the Dolphins side of things. I will say this. The Tua-Herbert debate, who is the better quarterback, it at least has a pulse here, because this was an NFL game in which Tua outplayed Justin Herbert. And that's got to count for something, right? And it wasn't even really like, oh my God, Tyreek Hill is always constantly screaming open. And all Tua's got to do is hit the top of his drop and boom, hit him in stride. And sure, there was plenty of that in this game. But that stuff needs to be executed if you're the quarterback. But on top of that, Tua did a bunch of stuff with his feet, extending plays. There's 4 plays in this game, like big third downs where he's evading the pressure, on the move, showing good pocket presence in a way that Herbert necessarily didn't in this game. Now, we got a long way to go. We got all of Herbert's career versus all of Tua's career. It's one game against each other, which raises the stakes. But coming into this game, I would have laughed and maybe even spit in your face. Hopefully I'm not that mean. But I would have thought it unthinkable to say that that's even a debate. And I would say that the idea of it has a pulse. And I'm really starting to enjoy the Tua experience, which is an experience. The way I described it on Twitter is it's like getting on a plane, heading to Europe or somewhere you're really excited to go, a good destination, but there's expected turbulence. There's going to be some bumps on the trip, but you think the end destination is probably going to be, you're going to get there safe and it's going to be pretty good. And that's mostly what it feels like with Tua. And the reason I say that is his biggest strength as a passer is oftentimes his biggest weakness. It's that his style where he is so aggressive. He anticipates throwing windows. He's so confident in the offense and his read that he's got the ball going where it needs to go. And 8 times out of 10, it's beautiful. He's hitting guys in stride. He's dropping them into these little windows, and linebackers are looking all over the place. Safeties are pointing fingers like, what are you doing? He is dissecting these zones 8 out of 10 times. But 2 out of 10, you're like, whoa, that was close. Or oh, Tua, no, that was not right. You just threw it straight into 3 defenders. Or like, no, that was not a good deep shot to take there at that moment. Like, I think it is really that balance where it's like 8 out of 10 plays with this offense, with Mike McDaniel drawing this thing up, and these receivers. But it's not always these receivers, right? Sometimes it's River Craycraft making plays down the field, right? Sometimes it really is just genuinely a beautiful throw from Tua. But with this structure, 8 out of 10 times, this thing is unstoppable with the combination of Tua, McDaniel, and these playmakers, which is like this perfect match made in heaven. 2 out of 10 times, though, you're putting the ball in harm's way. And I will be honest, one turnover-worthy play for Tua from my boys at PFF this week, I don't know about that. Because he did literally throw a pick. That's one. And then there's like 6 other plays in this game where defenders are getting their hands on balls. You're scratching your head like, whoa, that was a little too aggressive from Tua. But at the end of the day, even if Tua threw 3 picks in this game, his aggressiveness would have paid off. But he makes a lot of really nice throws. He had 6 big-time throws in this game. And then he's adding some extra out-of-structure stuff. So on those plays where it's not all perfect, sometimes he'll force it, but sometimes now we're really starting to see him with good pocket presence. I counted 4 times in this game where he extended plays with his feet and made a really nice play. The highlight one is going to be where he stepped up in the pocket, bought a little bit of time for himself, and hit Tyreek Hill across his body on a dime. Probably the best throw of his career there. So I'm on board for the Tua experience as long as it's a tempered conversation and we can acknowledge like there are downsides to his aggressiveness, and there's going to be games like the Packers game last year or the Chargers game last year where, you know, there's going to be some games where instead of 8 out of 10, it's 6 out of 10 good, and there's some really bad throws in there. Or maybe on the 2 out of 10, they actually caught every interception. So it's a ride, but the final destination is typically going to be a pretty good place with Tua. So sign me up for this Dolphins offense in general. I mean, the Tyreek is just so insane. But defensively, I have some hesitations. You know, I love Vic Fangio. He's accomplished a million amazing things in this league. But, you know, I've talked a lot about the problems with this scheme, the light fronts, the squishy zones, the soft style of defense. The Chargers took advantage of it, right? Like, if the idea is Vic Fangio-style schemes are taking over the league, we get a lot of light boxes, and the run game is blowing up in the NFL. This is another example where literally Vic Fangio takes over for a otherwise really good run defense, and they come out in their first game and get just run all the hell over. Now, it didn't help that David Long was horrible in this game with his gap discipline. If he's going to play in a Fangio-style scheme, it doesn't get any different in terms of having to be responsible for your gap than it does in Tennessee, where they move guys around, they fly around, they let you play fast. It's a completely different ask in this defense. So it's not just Fangio. He's got to be better. And for some reason, Christian Wilkins was nowhere to be found against the run in this game, an otherwise dominant run defender. So that was weird too. So it's not just Fangio. The players got to be better up front. But the scheme doesn't help, where it's a lot of light boxes. The DBs are playing off. They're not as in position to be supportive against the run as they've been in kind of a Fangio or a Belichick-style defense in the past. So it's just another example, just like the Chargers across the board, of like, is this scheme the best in the NFL right now? It just wasn't a great start for Vic Fangio. No way around it. We'll see what kind of adjustments he makes. Now, for the... Oh, by the way, Bradley Chubb. Hello? Are you playing? Where the hell was Bradley Chubb, the guy they traded a first-round pick for and then paid $23 million a year, that I've been going at it with Dolphins fans? I called this a Frank Clark-esque overpay that made no sense. Played 70 snaps in this game, nowhere to be found. Got just like a complete replacement level player in this game. So calling you out, Bradley Chubb, as Dolphins fans should as well. If you're getting paid that much and they're giving up first-round picks for you, you can't look like a random defensive end off the street. So that was pretty frustrating. As for the Chargers, Brandon Staley's on fraud watch. Is there any other way to put this? I mean, dude, I've said this before, but what is it that you do here? You're a defensive head coach who's had one of the worst defenses in the league with an expensive defense with star talent up and down the board. Your disciple on the other side, or your mentor on the other side of the ball, Vic Fangio, also getting lit up, and you're out here not making adjustments, have no answer at all for Tyreek Hill. I didn't see a double team. He may have tried them, but there was plenty of times where they clearly were not trying to double team or do anything specifically to stop the Dolphins from destroying them with Tyreek Hill. I mean, this is what makes Mike McDaniel so fun. If something's working, he's not going to just stop doing it. He's going to keep going until you prove you can stop it. And that's what they did with Tyreek Hill, just dominating down the field. So the defense was soft. They had no pass rush. It was an embarrassing day for Brandon Staley's defense. Expected way more from him. And he's on fraud watch. Like, if he can't get this defense straight, the Chargers are going to disappoint, and they have got to get rid of him because this team has way too much talent to keep disappointing like this. I did think the offense looked better flow. You know, the run game was working, so lean into it. That's what I like about Kellen Moore is he's versatile as a play caller. Has a lot of different answers. Loved the play design and the Donald Parham touchdown, by the way. A little fake toss. It's goal line, 4th and 1. They run a little fake toss to draw in the linebacker. Then they line up the 6'8" Donald Parham in the slot. And with the linebacker just drawn out of the play a little bit, just a quick little flip from Justin Herbert. There's nothing a defensive back can do to that. A 6'8" tight end with a well-placed ball. Like, that was a really good play design to score there. I think the offense is going to continue to roll. And it's not that, Herbert did not play poorly in this game. He just didn't play as well as Tua did. And that was one of the differences in this game. But the Chargers are going to be okay, but are they going to be great? And can Brandon Staley figure this thing out? I don't know. We're going to kind of speed round these last 3 games here. 2 of them were rain games that are really difficult to come away with strong opinions about, and one of them was that devastating Jets game. But Cincinnati at Cleveland, for Cincinnati, complete burn-the-tape game. Joe Burrow not practicing in the preseason. The weather made it impossible, and for all the small hands jokes, it clearly was impacting Joe Burrow, and maybe that's something to keep an eye on in the future. If you got really rainy game, can Joe Burrow even throw the ball? I don't know. Definitely felt like that was a big impact in this one way or another. But also, like, the Browns just for some reason have their number, right? I don't know what that's all about, but maybe it's karma for stealing their owner and their name rights and all that stuff. I don't know. But this happened to Cincy last year. I'm not going to panic about them. If it continues to look ugly against the Ravens this week, then we can start to have some real conversations. But this was a burn-the-tape game. Look at your blitz protection, see what went wrong there, clean that stuff up, and then just throw away the tape. Now, the Browns, the conditions definitely impacted the Browns' offense as well. Deshaun himself was having a hard time gripping the ball, and it just evaluating the offenses in this game, it's just so hard to do. As much as I'd love to pile on Watson and say he played like crap, but I want to be fair in my analysis of his play. Clearly, the weather was impacting both these quarterbacks' ability to throw a football. Now, defensively for the Browns, though, holy hell, this group is going to be terrifying. Loved the Jim Schwartz hire. We just talked about Fangio-style schemes being soft and squishy and scared. This is the opposite. This is blitzing, aggressive, beat their ass up front, and a way more talented group with Za'Darius Smith, Dalvin Tomlinson, Shelby Harris. All these guys were fantastic. They were built to play in a game like this with the run game, too, on the other side of the ball, being better with Nick Chubb. So just a great day for the Browns. Also got to shout out Grant Delpit. My dude at safety back there seems to have cleaned up his tackling question marks that really led to him falling into the second round. And you clean that up, he's an athletic coverage defender with a ton of size and length. He's like a baby Jamal Adams in a lot of ways. So he's a real player back there and is just another plus for this defense. Then we got Dallas at the New York Giants. I mean, talk about a burn the tape game for the Giants and a matchup that didn't favor them in that game script. I mean, they come out, decent opening drive, then block field goal, touchdown, goes the other way. Then you have a fumbled ball thanks to the crappy conditions, sets up another touchdown for the Cowboys. And then you end up with a Giants team that is, their success offensively last year was all scripted offense, right? Brian Daboll being able to impact the game with his play calling, the bootlegs, the controlled offense, the run game. That goes out the window when you're down 20-0 because the game got off to a horrible start. Not to mention, you're going against a defense that thrives in those go-ahead winning situations. So it was super impressive that Dallas did what they did with the defense and the special teams. And clearly, they didn't let the weather impact their game, and they balled out. But it was definitely a game script that helped Dallas, really hurt the Giants. And my opinion isn't really changed on Dallas's defense. I knew they were going to be nasty, and they were. So good for them for maintaining that. But yeah, I'm not gonna try to take too much away from that game that was just really hard to watch. And then Buffalo at the New York Jets. We'll wrap up with this. So devastating. I can't even really talk about it. All the hype gone, just like that with the Aaron Rodgers injury. So that's why I just don't even really have a ton of energy to discuss it. But the Jets still do have a chance. I think this defense proved, again, just how incredible they are going to be this year, and that's why it makes it so heartbreaking to know that Aaron Rodgers could have had this defense with this pass rush and these guys and these playmakers on the back end and this coach for that defense and Robert Saleh. It's a special, special group that won the game for this team, forcing mistakes out of Josh Allen. And the resiliency of this team, the only interesting thing to see moving forward for the offense is, A, does Aaron Rodgers become involved with the offense? And B, can Zach Wilson step up? Wilson didn't look great in this game. I do think he will benefit from the offense being more catered to his game as opposed to Aaron Rodgers' game and getting more scripted plays in there. I'm going to say he's got a chance, but it really doesn't look great. But I would love to see Rodgers get involved. Maybe this team can have success, make the playoffs. I want to see him come back. And we saw him calling plays for Zach Wilson in the preseason. This offense was already really designed around his mind. Is there a setup here where Rodgers can actually be the guy with the headset, communicate with Zach, say, hey, read the safety here. If he goes here, throw it to him. Have a tangible impact on the game through Nathaniel Hackett that could lead to a kind of a beautiful thing here. It would be really interesting to see if they could work that out. I don't know if it's going to go that way, but I would love to see it. I would like to see this team make a move for a Jacoby Brissett. He's got familiarity with the system. I thought he played really well in a similar system for the Browns last year. And I think it could look okay enough for them to be a playoff team. But I do think Super Bowl hopes are likely out the window for the New York Jets this season. And then for the Bills, this was I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed game for them. Josh Allen coughed the game up. Stupid decisions. I said the Jets defense forced them. They kind of did. The pass rush was there. They finished the intercept. Some of them were nice catches from not LaMarcus Joyner, the other safety. Anyway, Whitehead. They forced them, but they were made possible because Josh Allen was sugar high Josh, cost his team the game. Stupid mistakes. We talked about this in the Bills deep dive. You kind of just live with games like this from Josh Allen because he's probably going to bounce back, kick the Raiders' ass this week, and get back on track. But does he have enough games like this that cost them playoff positioning? And does he have games like this in the playoffs that cost him games in those playoff games? And that's going to be the fear with Josh Allen. Beyond that, things just don't quite feel fully right in terms of the rhythm of that Bills offense. I do still really think they miss Brian Daboll. I just want to see them be a little bit more consistent down in, down out offensively. It just never really feels like you know what they're going to do. And then, in a bad way, by the way, not a good way. And then, defensively, it's hard to take too much away when you're playing Zach Wilson, who, again, just didn't look comfortable getting the ball out, reading defenses. I do think the pass rush played well. That's worth noting. I had a lot of questions about the Bills' pass rush, and Ed Oliver was really good in this game, and Greg Rousseau was good. Like, they were getting after it up front. I'll give them credit for that. But I do think they missed Tremaine Edmonds in run defense, that physical force in the middle of the field. They were getting gashed against the run. And they're another one of these teams that wants to live in six-man fronts. And I'm curious to see how this run defense does moving forward, without that big, almost quasi-extra defensive lineman in the box with Tremaine Edmonds. So we'll keep an eye on that. I'm not panicking about the Bills. I think Josh Allen cleans things up, and this is still a really good team moving forward. Definitely just I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed performance from the Bills. That's it for our Week 1 preview. We're going to get out of here. Thank you so much for watching. Please do leave a review for the show. Drop a like if you're on YouTube. I appreciate you guys. Let me know your comments down below, what you think of the analysis. We'll be back every Wednesday for these weekly reviews. Patreon guys, get your questions in. We'll be doing the mailbag. I think either on an individual show on like Fridays or something. We'll be getting to the mailbags throughout the season. No mailbag this week, though, as I'm heading out of town early this week, going down to the Cowboys-Jets game. But, we're out of here. Thank you for watching. Peace out.